Chapter 598. Everyone's gaze was focused on Zhou Xian's hand. Above Zhou Xian's right hand floated a 9-inch tall phoenix crown. The front of the phoenix crown was decorated with 9 golden dragons and 8 emerald golden phoenixes. On the back of the phoenix crown, there was also a golden phoenix. The 9 golden dragons were either soaring with their heads held high, standing on all fours, walking or galloping. They all had different postures. At the same time, each of the 9 golden dragons held a spiritual pearl in its mouth. The entire phoenix crown emitted a dazzling light of all colors, causing people to squint their eyes. This 9 phoenix crown is also known as the 9 Dragons 9 Phoenix Crown. The entire 9 phoenix crown is made of precious materials, and there are a total of 3,600 spirit pearls. Each spirit pearl comes from a different universe. In order to find enough spirit pearls, I have been on the move all these years. We have searched through more than 90,000 universes and found 3,600 spirit pearls. At the same time, we also found all kinds of precious gems. Zhou Xian pointed at the golden ring at the mouth of the 9 phoenix crown. Look, for example, this small ring has a total of 18 unique sparkling and translucent gems. The entire 9 phoenix crown cost 198 gems, and each gem was taken from a different universe. Other than that, Zhou Xian pointed to the top of the phoenix coronet, to the 9 spiritual pearls held in the mouths of the 9 golden dragons. These 9 spiritual pearls are the 9 most precious spiritual pearls among the 3,600 spiritual pearls. Everyone should be able to sense it. That's right. These 9 spiritual pearls are all Grand Mist spiritual treasures. There are a lot of materials required. Furthermore, one must possess an excellent memory. Our Thunder Punishment City, with Grandmaster O Yezi as the leader, gathered 81 expert artifact refiners to assist us. We spent a total of half a year before we managed to refine this 9 Dragons 9 Phoenix crown. I look forward to it being worn by my cousin during our wedding. After saying that, Zhou Minghui smiled and looked at the 13 god kings above. His face was filled with confidence. Everyone held their breaths. What a luxurious crown with 9 dragons and 9 phoenixes. This was indeed the most luxurious 9 phoenix crown in the history of the divine realm. This was especially true for the 9 most precious spiritual pearls. But it was still very rare. The most important thing was that these materials were all taken from different universes. In the Great Hall, the utmost North Sage Emperor's wife, Chunyu Ro, had a joyous expression on her face as she praised, Good 9 Phoenix Crown." The 13 God Kings couldn't help but nod. From the beginning until now, among the 14 gifts displayed, Zhou Xian's gift was indeed the most shocking. As for the other gifts, they were either coincidental or new. However, in terms of effort, none of them could compare to the most luxurious gift in the history of the God realm, the 9 Phoenix Crown. Zhou Xian smiled. At the same time, he took a glance at Qin Yu beside him. Zhou Xian looked forward to seeing Qin Yu's expression turn ugly, but, at that moment, Qin Yu still had a smile on his face. Furthermore, he was looking at the 9 Phoenix Crown with a gaze of praise and admiration. Seeing Zhou Xian look over, Qin Yu nodded slightly at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian was slightly taken aback and nodded slightly. Merely 9 decorative Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. They are merely of the same quality as high-level heavenly divine artifacts. If I were to let you all know that my Purple Mystic Mansion has a total of 62 high-level heavenly divine artifacts as decorations, what sort of expression would you all have? Qin Yu was very confident. Although this 9 Phoenix Crown was precious, it was at most on the same level as the miraculous Mirage Spirit Mirror. As for his Purple Mystic Mansion, it also contained the Mirage Spirit Mirror. Zhou Xian, this 9 Phoenix Crown is indeed pretty good. The utmost North Sage Emperor Jiang Fan also nodded in satisfaction. Next, it should be Qin Yu's turn. Zhou Xian put away the 9 Phoenix Crown, slightly bowed and then returned to his seat. At this moment, Qin Yu stood up and walked to the center of the Sage Emperor's palace. He slightly bowed and then looked to the various god kings above. Among the god kings above, Uncle Lon, the Azura god king, the blood demon queen, and them all smiled at Chinyu. God kings, this gift of mine is called the Purple Mystic Mansion, Chinyu said with a clear voice and a smile. The Purple Mystic Mansion is the mansion where I plan to marry Princess Zhongli. However, the Sage Emperor's palace is a bit small. It is hard for me to show it to everyone. How about Chinyu? The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhongfan said with a smile. Do not worry, it's merely a space. The utmost North Sage Emperor pointed to the sky with one hand. An enormous gate with a circumference of several tens of meters appeared in the air above the Sage Emperor's palace. I have already set up a space. Everyone go in there and look at the Purple Mystic Mansion. What do you all think? The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhongfan looked to the other god kings. The Wood Mansion's god king Zhonglan was the first to stand up. He said with a smile. Interesting. Zhou Xian's 9 phoenix crown was said to be for Li heir to wear during their marriage. Qin Yu's Purple Mystic Mansion was said to be the mansion where he would marry Li heir. Haha, interesting. The various god kings also started laughing. After that, the 13 god kings all stepped into the space set up by the utmost North Sage Emperor. Qin Yu and them also stepped into the space. The other heavenly deities also entered the space. Inside the space set up by the utmost North Sage Emperor. When Zhou Xian walked past Qin Yu, he said via voice transmission. Qin Yu, your gift is the Purple Mystic Mansion. What about the Mirage Spirit Mirror? Zhou Xian was indeed very confused. The Mirage Spirit Mirror was a miraculous item of the divine realm. This was publicly known. Even the 9 phoenix crown was only comparable to the Mirage Spirit Mirror. Zhou Xian knew that Qin Yu possessed the Mirage Spirit Mirror. However, if he possessed the Mirage Spirit Mirror, why didn't he use it? Zhou Xian did not understand. Faced with Zhou Xian's question, Qin Yu merely smiled mysteriously. He said via voice transmission, Brother Zhou Xian, you'll naturally know once you continue watching. After entering this space, everyone took their places. At the same time, their gazes were all gathered onto Qin Yu in the center. Everyone was looking forward to it. Last time, Qin Yu had taken out a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. What about this time? Qin Yu looked to everyone. He smiled and said, Everyone, how about the Purple Mystic Mansion? Everyone please take a look. Qin Yu flipped his hand. Immediately, everyone felt that the sky and earth had darkened. When they raised their heads to look, they discovered that there was an enormous mansion above them. That mansion flew to the front of everyone. The entire mansion occupied an area of over 1,000 miles. What a mansion! The Azura God King exclaimed in admiration. At this moment, no one cared about the Azura God King's words. That was because everyone's attention was attracted by the Purple Mystic Mansion. That majestic flame aura and ice and snow aura coiled around it, causing the entire Purple Mystic Mansion to appear misty. What attracted everyone was none other than that dense heavenly divine artifact aura. That unique aura. This entire mansion is a heavenly divine artifact. The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhongfan looked to Qin Yu and asked. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. That's right. This Purple Mystic Mansion was created by me using the method of creating heavenly divine artifacts. Of course, everyone is unable to tell anything from the outside. Please follow me. Qin Yu stood to the side. With an intention, the enormous mansion gate of the Purple Mystic Mansion opened. The 13 God Kings all walked in. The other heavenly deities as well as the candidates also walked in. Once they entered the Purple Mystic Mansion, it was as if they had entered a world of ink and wash paintings. All kinds of naturally born strange rocks and plants were intertwined together. All kinds of scenes appeared so natural and harmonious. The Purple Mystic Mansion is divided into 3 great regions. This is the first region. I call it the Divine Realm region. Qin Yu said with a smile. Divine Realm region, what is the meaning behind that? The blood demon King Yu Cha looked to Qin Yu with a smile. Qin Yu smiled and said, "Blood demon king, please do not be anxious. You will naturally know in a bit." As Qin Yu said that, he began to lead everyone to see all kinds of scenes. Suddenly, the Southwest Sage Emperor looked to a stone sculpture in a flowerbed in surprise. That is, the Southwest Sage Emperor possessed astonishing eyesight. He was able to tell with a single glance that this stone sculpture was extraordinary. Her words immediately attracted everyone's attention. Qin Yu smiled, nodded and said, "That's right. This stone sculpture is actually a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. However, the true form of this high-quality heavenly divine artifact is a stone sculpture. That is because I created it for decorative purposes. This stone sculpture contains the special effect of mind meditation." Everyone on the scene could not help but be stunned. To God Kings, high-quality heavenly divine artifacts were relatively precious. In the entire divine realm, including Qin Yu, there were only 3 Grandmaster artifact craftsmen. Generally, when crafting high-quality heavenly divine artifacts, who would craft a high-quality heavenly divine artifact for decorative purposes? The gaze with which the Blood Demon King looked to Qin Yu became even more passionate. That water-spitting golden dragon also seems to be a heavenly divine artifact. Immediately, someone discovered another heavenly divine artifact. That water-spitting golden dragon is only a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact. Qin Yu said with a light smile. Everyone was stunned. How easily did he say that? Only a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact. Only nothing more. In the entire Purple Mystic Mansion, there are over several hundred mid-quality heavenly divine artifact decorative items. As for high-quality heavenly divine artifact decorative items, there are a total of 62 of them. Qin Yu said with a smile. All of the heavenly deities, including the 13 God Kings, looked to Qin Yu. Even the Azura God King, who had been smiling the entire time, had a stunned expression. High-quality heavenly divine artifact. Many high-level heavenly deities did not possess a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. From this, one could imagine how rare and precious high-quality heavenly divine artifacts were. Qin Yu actually crafted 62 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts in one go. Most importantly, these 62 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts were all for decoration and not for attack or defense. What a wastrel! However, other than Grandmaster Artifact Craftsmen, who else possessed the qualifications to be defeated? Even the other 2 Grandmaster Artifact Craftsmen, O Yezi and Duanmu Feng, required a large amount of time to craft a single high-quality heavenly divine artifact. To them, every single spirit awakening was a form of torture. How could they possibly be as relaxed as Qin Yu? Qin Yu, you are truly extravagant. Zhang Fan merely exclaimed in admiration. He had nothing else to say. In everyone's hearts, their attitude toward Qin Yu had changed. To be able to craft 62 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts and several hundred mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts, although they were only for decoration, his artifact crafting ability had already been displayed. The entire mansion, other than the ordinary plants, courtyard walls, houses and so on, is a single Purple Mystic Mansion. The Purple Mystic Mansion itself is a low-quality heavenly divine artifact. Qin Yu said with a smile. Everyone please follow me. Below us is a pond forest. Following the cobblestone path, the group entered a pond forest. Right after entering it, everyone felt that the sky and earth were spinning. After that, they all looked to their surroundings with shock. This was a space, the Divine Realm space. I have used the formation array space to set up that pond forest. Inside this pond forest is a world exactly the same as the Divine Realm. The only difference is, here there is no divine spiritual energy. There is no restriction of the Divine Realm. Qin Yu said with a smile. Everyone present was able to sense that those heavenly deities were able to easily cover the entire second divine realm with their divine awareness. If this was the real divine realm, their divine awareness would at the very most only be able to cover several hundred miles. What extravagance! Immediately, someone exclaimed in admiration. After exiting the Purple Mystic Mansion's first region, everyone continued onward. The second region was the future living area. This place was very large and had all kinds of peculiar buildings. This hall is the place where the family gathers and eats in the future. The mural behind the hall is also a space. It is called the Second Immortal Devil and Demon Realm. Qin Yu pointed to the mural hanging on the wall of the hall. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu said in shock. Immortal Devil and Demon Realm. Is that the cosmic space under our utmost eastern regions Mount Dazzling Gold? Precisely. Qin Yu said with a smile. That is Qin Yu's hometown. Zhou Xian said indifferently. Zhou Xian was very clear about Qin Yu's origin. To use a large space as a mural, even ordinary god kings would find it difficult to accomplish. That was because it was very difficult for those god kings to fix a space. What about Qin Yu? Qin Yu had merely set up a formation array space. As long as Qin Yu did not remove the formation array, this space would exist forever. Within the Purple Mystic Mansion's second region's living area was the place where the future Qin Yu and Li Er would live. Everyone, do you see that little mirror? Don't think that it's an ornament. That little mirror is a miraculous item of the divine realm, the Mirage Spirit Mirror. Qin Yu said with a smile. Those god kings glanced at each other. They were all shocked. Merely no one said anything. That was because they were too shocked. At this moment, Zhou Xian also understood why Qin Yu's gift was not the Mirage Spirit Mirror. So, the Mirage Spirit Mirror was only a part of the Purple Mystic Mansion. After exiting the Purple Mystic Mansion's second region, everyone entered the Purple Mystic Mansion's third region. The Purple Mystic Mansion's third region was the leisure area. There was a lake with a circumference of several hundred miles. On the lake there were several small boats. At the same time there were numerous pavilions. Those pavilions were connected to each other. They actually ran through the entire several hundred miles of lake. There are a lot of pavilions on this lake. There is a rather large pavilion at the edge of one of the branches. That pavilion is actually the scene of a mortal realm planet. That is also the appearance of my hometown. Qin Yu pointed to the bottom of the lake with a single hand. At the bottom of the lake, there is also a palace. In the future, it will also be a residence for me and Princess Zhongli. Chapter 599. When the 13 God Kings and the various heavenly deities walked out of the Purple Mystic Mansion, they were still in a state of shock. Only after a long while did everyone calm down. Everyone left the space created by the utmost North Sage Emperor, and returned to the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace. Haha! What a Purple Mystic Mansion! The utmost North Sage Emperor praised with a smile. Today, I have finally broadened my horizons. Qin Yu, this Purple Mystic Mansion is indeed unprecedented. It is extremely novel. Husband. Qin Yu Ro spoke again. Qin Yu immediately frowned. This Qin Yu Ro's words were definitely unfavorable to him. Merely. This Qin Yu Ro was Zhongli's mother. Qin Yu could only endure it. Wife, what's wrong? Zhong Fan looked to his wife. Qin Yu Ro smiled to Qin Yu and said, Qin Yu's Purple Mystic Mansion has also broadened my horizons. However, this second gift is a test of one's attentiveness. It is a test of one's novelty. It is not a test of extravagance. Qin Yu. A mansion that is a heavenly divine artifact, this is indeed the first time I have seen it. However, this is truly a bit too extravagant. Although the main material that Qin Yu used to craft the mansion, the Cyan Nightmare Stone, could be considered a relatively good material. However, merely by the fact that Qin Yu was able to find enough materials to craft a mansion with a circumference of 1,000 miles, one could tell that the Cyan Nightmare Stone could not be considered to be precious. If Oyezi or Duan Mufeng were to craft the mansion, then with their artifact crafting ability, They would definitely not be able to rely on the Cyan Nightmare Stone to make the mansion comparable to a low-quality heavenly divine artifact. A mansion that was capable of crafting a heavenly divine artifact, even if others wanted to, they would not have the ability to do so. Everyone, please remember. This second gift is not a test of how precious it is or how extravagant it is. Instead, it is a test of one's attentiveness. In comparison, that 9 Phoenix crown, each and every one of the spiritual pearls were obtained from different cosmic spaces. For those 3,600 spiritual pearls, they were only found after searching through over 90,000 cosmic spaces. One could imagine how attentive they were. Chunyu Ro praised. At this moment, Jiang Lan, who rarely spoke in the palace hall, was finally annoyed. Sister-in-law, what you said is incorrect. Could it be that crafting a heavenly divine artifact mansion is not attentive? Crafting several hundred mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts and several tens of high-quality heavenly divine artifact were all for decoration. Besides, you've already gone in to take a look. In the arrangement of the entire Purple Mystic Mansion, which part of it did not display their intentions? Jiang Lan coldly reprimanded. What second uncle said makes sense. However, it's up to each person to decide which of the two gifts is more attentive. At the very least, I believe that the Purple Mystic Mansion is only a display of Qin Yu's artifact forging ability. Chunyu Ro said with a faint smile. However, the final judgment will still be left to the various god kings. As Zhang Li's mother, I am merely voicing some opinions. Chunyu Ro was Zhang Li's mother after all. She still had the right to speak. Well then, let's look at the next gift. Zhang Fan said. At this moment, the next shy youth after Qin Yu, Shen Tufan, walked to the center of the hall and displayed his gift. Shen Tufan and Quain Ho's gifts were quickly displayed. After seeing the 9 Phoenix Crown and Purple Mystic Mansion, the other gifts were overshadowed. Everyone understood that this second chosen candidate spot could only end up in the hands of either Qin Yu or Zhou Xian. The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhang Fan said with a smile. But now that the 17 gifts have all been displayed, each and every one of the gifts contained everyone's intentions. As for who the second spot will belong to, it will now be decided by the various god kings. Whoever has the most god kings will obtain the second spot. Immediately, everyone below held their breaths. Qin Yu and Zhou Xian both glanced at each other. Their eyes both contained a trace of sharpness. Neither of them would easily admit defeat. I'll go first. The Azura God King stood up with misty eyes. He looked to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Crafting a low-quality heavenly divine artifact requires precious materials. In order to craft a low-quality heavenly divine artifact that is 1,000 miles long, I reckon that it would be hard to find that many precious materials in the entire divine realm. This is what I am most amazed by about this Purple Mystic Mansion. I support Qin Yu. Qin Yu was slightly delighted. The Southwest Sage Emperor, that beautiful lady, also stood up. She nodded and sighed. The Purple Mystic Mansion has also caused me to exclaim in admiration. Merely, I feel that what little sister Chunyu said is very reasonable. This Purple Mystic Mansion is something that Qin Yu crafted using only materials. It is a display of his artifact crafting ability. As for his diligence, I believe that he is inferior to Zhou Xian. I support Zhou Xian. Qin Yu felt that the situation was bad. This was a display of his artifact crafting ability. Qin Yu felt it to be funny. The enormous Purple Mystic Mansion was definitely something unprecedented in the entire divine realm. Naturally, it was a novelty. Furthermore, with all those mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts and high-quality heavenly divine artifacts as decorations, which one of them was not crafted by Qin Yu with all of his heart and soul? Could it be that it was very easy for a Grandmaster artifact craftsman to craft a high-quality heavenly divine artifact? Which high-quality heavenly divine artifact did not contain Qin Yu's painstaking effort? Furthermore, what about the Mirage Spirit Mirror? The Mirage Spirit Mirror was a novelty, right? Soon 6 of the 13 God Kings expressed their support. Among these 6 people, 3 of them supported Qin Yu and 3 of them supported Zhou Xian. The 3 people that supported Qin Yu were the Azura God King, the Blood Demon Queen and Uncle Lon. The utmost West Sage Emperor of the Mountain of Flames also stood up and looked at his son, Shen Tufan, in a doting manner. For the past 10 years my son has been crafting that 1,000 hearts luan, without sleep or rest. Although the materials used are only ordinary trees from the God realm, he has not slept or rested for 10 years. The amount of effort he has put into it, even I am extremely moved. Thus I support my son Fan. I know that it is unlikely that this chosen spot will belong to my son. This support of mine, it can be considered as an encouragement from a father to a son. The utmost West Sage Emperor lightly smiled to Shen Tufan and then sat down. Every single God King expressed their support one after another. Among the 13 God Kings, the utmost West Sage Emperor and the utmost South Sage Emperor supported everyone other than Qin Yu and Zhou Xian. As for the other 11 God Kings, they all supported either Zhou Xian or Qin Yu. In terms of effort, with that many high-quality heavenly divine artifacts and mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts, even if they were to be crafted by Grandmaster Artifact Craftsmen, how could they possibly be easily crafted? O Yezi and Duan Mu Feng, in all these years, how many heavenly divine artifacts have they crafted? How many high-quality heavenly divine artifacts have they crafted? Merely several tens of them. Qin Yu took out 62 heavenly divine artifacts at once. Furthermore, they are all decorative items. From this, one can tell how much effort he has put into crafting them. In terms of novelty, this purple mystic mansion is something that I have never seen before. Furthermore, that mirage spirit mirror. For Qin Yu to be able to obtain such a wondrous item from the divine realm, I am also filled with admiration. Furthermore, the layout of the entire purple mystic mansion, when Qin Yu introduced the functions of the various places, it was clear that he had thought of the life that he and my daughter Li Er would have in the future. To be so meticulous, I am also happy for my daughter. Thus I support Qin Yu. The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhang Fan said. At this moment, there were finally 4 God Kings supporting Qin Yu. As for Zhou Xian, there were 5 God Kings supporting him. I support my son, Zhou Xian. Zhou Hu stood up. It is not because of the relationship between father and son. Instead, it is because all these years I have been able to see the scene of my son busying himself for the 9 Phoenix crown. Thus, I naturally know of his intentions. 6 God Kings. There were now 6 God Kings supporting Zhou Xian. There were only 4 God Kings supporting Qin Yu. There were 2 God Kings supporting the others. And now, only a single God King remained that did not express his support. I've lost. Ever since the start of the evaluation, Qin Yu had felt as if he was having a nightmare. Many of the God Kings that were exclaiming in admiration in the Purple Mystic Mansion had actually started to support Zhou Xian. I support Qin Yu. The final God King, the utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu, declared his choice. Unfortunately, even though he supported Qin Yu, there were only 5 Qin Yu supporters. As for Zhou Xian, there were 6. The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhang Fan was frowning. The various God Kings above were all silent. Ever since the utmost East Sage Emperor finished speaking, everyone had grown silent. Chun Yu Ro lightly pushed Zhang Fan. Husband, it's time to announce the result. Chun Yu Ro said in a low voice. Zhang Fan took a deep breath. He then stood up and said in a clear voice. Everyone, the evaluation has ended. There are 6 God Kings supporting Zhou Xian. As for Qin Yu, there are only 5 God Kings supporting him. Thus, this second chosen candidate spot belongs to Zhou Xian. A smile immediately appeared on Zhou Xian's face. Qin Yu had a sunken expression the entire time. Suddenly, Qin Yu smiled. His smile was so modest and amiable. He raised his head and looked to the various God Kings above. He especially looked to the Southwest Sage Emperor and the other God Kings. God Kings, may I ask, did everyone do the same as what you said at the beginning of the groom search and judge the results fairly? Impudent! Zhou Hua was the first to shout. The expressions of the god kings above all turned ugly. Qinyu. Zhang Lan also shouted in a low voice. Uncle Lan knew very well that at this moment, he must not anger all the god kings above. If that were to happen, then it would be terrible. Qin Yu also understood that the second spot had already been decided. Whether it was fair or not, the god kings knew. However, he could not change the facts. It's nothing, just asking, Qin Yu smiled. Your Majesty, there's something I'm not sure if I should say. The god kings above were all silent. They were most worried about Qin Yu throwing a tantrum. If that happened, the situation would not be good. Speak. Zhang Fan displayed a smile to Qin Yu. Qin Yu then said, according to the original rules, those who get a spot are considered to be preliminarily selected. The final decision was made by the North Pole Sage Emperor and the Empress. Right. Precisely. Zhang Fan nodded. What I want to ask is that the 2 spots have already been decided. As for the 3rd spot, if either Zhou Xian or I obtain it, then... Is there a difference between those who obtain 2 spots and those who obtain a single spot? Qin Yu directly asked. Failure was a failure. He did not obtain the 2nd spot. Qin Yu was naturally angry and resentful. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Qin Yu understood very well that Zhou Xian's background was not something that he could compare with. In this world, there was no such thing as absolute fairness. Thus, Qin Yu was currently looking at the 3rd spot. Was there a difference between obtaining the 3rd spot and not obtaining it? If there was a difference, then Qin Yu would strive hard to obtain it. If there was no difference, then Qin Yu might as well give up and directly prepare the betrothal gifts. That Northwest Sage Emperor Zhou Hua also started to laugh. Haha, Qin Yu's question is very good. Brother Zhang, tell me, is there a difference between obtaining a single spot and obtaining 2 spots? Course there is. Zhang Fan said with a smile. I can clearly say that the difference between obtaining 2 spots and obtaining a single spot is extremely enormous. For example, if both of them were to present betrothal gifts, then the difference between their betrothal gifts is not enormous. Or if the difference is enormous, but it is unable to completely shock me and my wife, then the candidate who obtained 2 spots would definitely be my son-in-law. Zhang Fan said with a smile. Completely shocked. Qin Yu frowned. This explanation was truly too vague. What do you mean completely shocked? The Blood Demon Queen said with a smile. Zhang Fan said with a smile. It's very simple. For example, first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. For example, several hundred high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Or over 100,000 heavenly divine artifacts. All of these are capable of completely shocking me. Haha, Brother Zhang is dreaming. The utmost South Sage Emperor laughed in a clear voice. Are there 100,000 heavenly divine artifacts in the entire divine realm? Zhang Fan was not annoyed. He merely said. What I said was merely an assumption. The various god kings above were chatting and laughing. The various heavenly deities below were also chatting with each other. Zhou Xian, who stood to the side, lightly smiled to Qin Yu. However, he said via divine awareness voice transmission. Brother Qin Yu, I have already obtained the 2nd chosen candidate spot. I believe that the 3rd chosen candidate spot will still be mine. After all, the people who will be judging are all god kings. The majority of these god kings are related to our Zhou clan. Zhou Xian said via divine awareness voice transmission to Qin Yu. However, he still had a modest smile on his face. He then turned around and chatted with the people beside him. Qin Yu also lightly smiled. He had made a decision in his heart. I must obtain the 3rd chosen candidate spot. Furthermore, my betrothal gift is that over 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts. I do not believe that Zhou Xian would be able to make a comeback. If I were to lose even after obtaining 2 chosen candidate spots and 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts, humph then. Qin Yu's killing intent was growing in his heart. However, Qin Yu was currently enduring. All of this had yet to reach Qin Yu's bottom line. Even now, Qin Yu was still thinking of having Li Er marry him openly. However, once his bottom line was touched and his Li Er was snatched away, it would be impossible for Qin Yu to continue enduring. Chapter 600. After walking out of the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace, Uncle Fu, who had been waiting outside, immediately came up to them. "Uncle Fu, let's go." Qin Yu did not even look at Zhou Xian, who was full of smiles, and directly led Uncle Fu toward the imperial city's gates. Uncle Fu also knew that Qin Yu was in a bad mood, so he did not say anything. "Brother Qin Yu," Zhou Xian called out from behind. However, Qin Yu and Uncle Fu acted as if they didn't notice it and continued to walk. When Zhou Xian saw this, he only smiled coldly and did not call out to Qin Yu anymore. Lord. Zhou Xian's follower was also waiting outside the Sage Emperor's palace. Zhou Xian glanced at his follower and said frivolously, "Let's go back too." He glanced at Qin Yu's back and sneered softly. "So what if your cultivation speed is fast and your strength is strong? You want to compete with me?" Zhou Xian had always felt indignant toward Qin Yu. Less than 20,000 years ago, Qin Yu was just a minor character in the mortal realm. In Zhou Xian's eyes, he was not even comparable to an ant. However, in the blink of an eye, he had become a major character in the divine realm that made Zhou Xian feel enormous pressure. The huge gap naturally made Zhou Xian feel very uncomfortable. Defeating Qin Yu this time also made Zhou Xian feel very happy. However, when he thought about how he had to secretly ask a few sage emperors for help with his father's help, he felt very uncomfortable. Zhou Xian also felt a little uncomfortable. After all, the person he defeated with such difficulty was just a minor character in the mortal realm 10,000 years ago. Next time I will definitely make this Qin Yu lose without any complaints. Zhou Xian's eyes flashed with lightning. Floating cloud mansion in the guest hall. After Qin Yu sat down, he waved his hand and said, "Uncle Fu, you can leave first. Don't let anyone disturb me." Uncle Fu bowed respectfully and then left. Only Qin Yu was left in the guest hall. The guest hall was silent. The sage emperors that supported Zhou Xian in the judging this time around are clearly speaking lies against their conscience. Qin Yu's brows furrowed slightly. This second gift is a test of one's diligence. The arrangement of the Purple Mystic Mansion, the refinement of the Purple Mystic Mansion, and the ornaments of the heavenly divine artifacts. Can't you see my intentions then? Moreover, without mentioning anything else, just the Mirage Spirit Mirror alone is enough to compare with the 9 Phoenix Crown. But when judging, they didn't even mention the Mirage Spirit Mirror, completely ignoring it. I'm afraid they also know that they don't have an excuse to deny the Mirage Spirit Mirror. Qin Yu sneered in his heart. How could Qin Yu not see through the shady dealings between the sage emperors? I wonder what price Zhou Xian's old man, the Northwest Saint Emperor, paid this time to make those Saint Emperors support his son. Qin Yu sneered, the coldness in his eyes growing stronger. Some of the maids outside the hall didn't dare to enter. Even from outside the hall, they were able to easily sense the dense, ice-cold aura coming from the hall. Evidently, their master Qin Yu was currently burning with anger. The maids looked to each other. They all had helplessness in their eyes. Suddenly, a maid looked to the hall in surprise. The other maids also looked over. They were also surprised to discover that a person had appeared in the hall without any cause or reason. However, no one had ever walked past them and entered the hall before. Teleportation. These maids were all shocked. Was the person who had entered the hall a god king? "Uncle Lon, why have you come?" When Qin Yu saw Zhang Lan appear in the center of the hall, he immediately restrained his aura and stood up. Zhang Lan shook his head with a smile. "From your appearance earlier, it would appear that you were truly enraged. What use is there in being angry? I merely vented my anger. I have yet to reach the level of facing insults with a smile. In the Sage Emperor's palace, I could only restrain myself. However, now that I've arrived here, I decided to vent the anger in my heart." Qin Yu said casually. Zhang Lan slightly nodded. I also know that you would not become hot-headed because of a small matter like this. The reason why I came here was firstly to check out your current state. Secondly, I came to ask you, do you possess certainty in obtaining the third chosen candidate spot? Zhang Lan asked. Third chosen candidate spot. Qin Yu grew silent. He started to ponder. Qin Yu knew very well that as long as he took out a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, he would definitely be able to obtain the third chosen candidate spot. However, he currently only possessed 2 first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. One was the Fire Origin spiritual pearl. The other was the Purple Rain garment. Merely, this Fire Origin spiritual pearl was something that Qin Yu had prepared for his future child with Li Er. As for the Purple Rain garment, it was also something that he had prepared for Li Er. Qin Yu did not wish to take out either of them. Other than these two, Qin Yu was unable to take out a gift that could completely defeat Zhou Xian. I will try my best for the third chosen candidate spot. I still possess a certain certainty in obtaining it. Qin Yu replied. Try your best. You mean you'll craft it yourself? Zhang Lan asked with a smile. Qin Yu slightly nodded. This was the advantage of being a Grandmaster artifact craftsman. Without treasures he could craft it himself. Merely. Even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. Although his ability in artifact crafting was very strong, even with those precious materials, he would generally only be able to craft high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Even if he were to reach his peak state, he would at the very most only be able to craft a weapon comparable to a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. However, a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure was something that he did not possess sufficient certainty in being able to defeat Zhou Xian. Little Yu, behind that Zhou Xian is the Thunder Punishment City. The Thunder Punishment City is one of the 8 great sacred lands of the Divine Realm. Although they only possess a single first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, they still possess many second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Especially, the Thunder Punishment City possesses the authority to manage the lower realms and the channel to leave the Divine Realm. Zhang Lan sighed and said, this Thunder Punishment City ought to be the one with the most treasures among the 8 great sacred lands after searching through the various cosmic spaces of the lower realms. The Thunder Punishment City was the most detached from worldly affairs among the 8 great sacred lands. In the Great War of the Divine Realm, only the Thunder Punishment City did not participate in it. Furthermore, behind the Thunder Punishment City was the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Thus, their status was even more extraordinary. The Thunder Punishment City was in charge of the Thunder Punishment energy and the channel to the lower realms from the Divine Realm. Qin Yu was stunned. No wonder. Qin Yu suddenly smiled. No wonder the other Sage Emperors gave the Northwest Sage Emperor face and supported Zhou Xian in the Sage Emperor's palace. Hearing that, Zhang Lan merely smiled. This was something that anyone with a bit of brain would be able to guess. However, so what if they managed to guess it? After all, those people were all Sage Emperors. Who would dare to refute what they said? Little Yu, in order for you to obtain the third chosen candidate spot, the weapon that you craft must definitely be at the peak of second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Only with that would you have certainty in being able to defeat Zhou Xian. Zhang Lan said solemnly to Qin Yu. Qin Yu naturally understood. For the sake of marrying Zhang Li, Zhou Xian was willing to part with a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. However, he was definitely unwilling to part with a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. While he was willing to part with it, the Thunder Punishment City would also not be willing to part with it. Thus, it would be fine as long as Zhang Lan's gift was at the peak of second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Little Yu, if you have no method, then I have a method. Zhang Lan said with a smile. What method? Qin Yu was overjoyed. Zhang Lan said with a smile. In my mansion, there is an ancient ironwood tree. The history of this ancient ironwood tree is not much shorter than the history of the Divine Realm. It is over 100 million years old. Its branches are capable of easily crafting mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts. As for its trunk, it is also not difficult for it to craft high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. As for the most precious item, the tree core, it contains grand mist spiritual energy. As long as one's skill is sufficient, it is even possible for one to craft a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. Let's chop down this ancient ironwood tree. Among the materials in the divine realm, there is not a single material that is comparable to the ancient ironwood tree's tree core. Back then, the craftsman god Cheho Yuan had used other precious materials to craft a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. If you were to craft it using the even more precious ancient ironwood tree's tree core, with your skill, I believe that a new first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure will be born in the divine realm. If you were to craft it, you would definitely be able to obtain the third chosen candidate spot. Qin Yu was stunned. He looked to Uncle Lon in a daze. What's wrong? Zhang Lon looked to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Uncle Lon. Qin Yu felt a burst of sourness in his heart. The significance of this ancient ironwood tree to Uncle Lon was something that Qin Yu had heard before. When Uncle Lon became a god king, he had obtained this ancient ironwood tree. The ancient ironwood tree had accompanied Uncle Lon the entire time. Furthermore, when he chatted with Li Er, Qin Yu had also come to know that Uncle Lon and the God King of Life Suochome had spent countless years under the ancient ironwood tree. However, at this moment, Uncle Lon, for the sake of allowing him to obtain the third chosen candidate spot, was actually willing to chop down the ancient ironwood tree. Uncle Lon. Qin Yu's eyes had turned slightly red. It wasn't that he didn't possess first-rate grand mist spiritual treasures. The Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl and the Purple Rain Dress were both first-rate grand mist spiritual treasures. Merely, he was unwilling to part with them. However, Uncle Lon, for the sake of him, was even willing to part with the ancient ironwood tree, an item that contained the memories of his deceased lover. What's wrong with you? Don't mind it. This ancient ironwood tree is mine. It could also be considered to be the Jiang clan's. After you refine a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure, you will still have to give it to the Jiang clan in the end. You can consider it as me giving it to Big Brother through you. Thus you do not have to mind it too much. Uncle Lon said with a smile. How could Qin Yu not understand? The reason why Uncle Lon said those words was so that Qin Yu would not feel any guilt. However, the more Uncle Lon said those words, the more uncomfortable Qin Yu felt. Especially when he saw Uncle Lan's smile. Uncle Lon, there's no need. Qin Yu took a deep breath. Foolish child, no matter what, I will not allow anyone to destroy your marriage with Li Er. You must also obtain the third chosen candidate spot. Enough, stop throwing a tantrum. Uncle Lon spoke as if he was reprimanding a pampered child. Well, Qin Yu shook his head. I am not throwing a tantrum. Rather, after hearing you mention the ancient ironwood tree, I thought of something. I am already certain that I will be able to obtain the third chosen candidate spot. Oh! Uncle Lon was a bit surprised. What is it? Uncle Fu! Qin Yu suddenly shouted. Qin Yu was Uncle Fu's master. Uncle Fu immediately sensed Qin Yu's intention and appeared in the guest room. Zhang Lon started to guess in his heart. Why did Qin Yu want Uncle Fu to come? Uncle Lon, follow me. Qin Yu turned around and said to Uncle Lon. Immediately after, with an intention, Zhang Lon sensed that the space was being shifted. He possessed the ability to resist it. However, he did not resist it. Sure enough, as he had anticipated, when the surroundings became clear, he had already arrived on the new Cosmos Purple Mystic Star. The thing I spoke of is right here. Qin Yu pointed to a palace on the East Hazy Mountain. That is the Bewitching God Temple. Zhang Lon said in shock. That's right. Qin Yu stepped into the Bewitching God Temple. After passing through the front palace, he directly arrived at the courtyard. Zhang Lon beside him also followed Qin Yu. He also wanted to see exactly what Qin Yu was talking about. Uncle Fu had been following beside Qin Yu the entire time. Uncle Lon, do you know about this tree? Qin Yu pointed to the thick and solid red copper tree in the courtyard of the Bewitching God Temple. This The ancient red copper tree. Zhang Lan immediately recognized it. That's right, this is the ancient red copper tree. It is also a divine tree that is second only to the ancient ironwood tree in the divine realm. Qin Yu said with a face filled with confidence. Why would there be an ancient red copper tree here? Zhang Lan asked in confusion. Uncle Fu, you tell me. Zhang Lan looked to Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu bowed respectfully. Senior Zhang Lan, this ancient red copper tree is an offensive second-rate grand mist spiritual treasure that the Thunder God King from back then, the Thunder Punishment City's Sage Emperor, requested the Old Master to craft. As for the Old Master, he requested for this ancient red copper tree. Oh! Zhang Lan slightly nodded. Although the core of this ancient red copper tree is pretty good, it is still a level lower than the core of the ancient ironwood tree. Even a Grandmaster artifact craftsman would likely only be able to craft a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. To use a divine would capable of crafting a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure in exchange for an offensive second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. This Zhou Hua's calculations were pretty good. Back then, Zhou Hua also had no other choice. Although he possessed the materials, he still needed skills. Without sufficient crafting skills, the ancient red copper tree would merely be an ornament. Qin Yu, the thing you spoke of is. Zhang Lan looked to Qin Yu. That's right, it's this ancient red copper tree. Qin Yu waved his sleeve. A blade-like spatial crack appeared in the entire space. That blade-like spatial crack streaked across the ancient red copper tree. The ancient red copper tree was severed from its roots and fell down with a loud bang. Chapter 601. In this new cosmos, Qin Yu was unparalleled. Even with the toughness of the ancient red tongue tree, Qin Yu was still able to cut it apart with a wave of his hand. However, if they were in the divine realm, then Qin Yu would likely have to spend a great amount of effort. Zhang Lan looked to the fallen ancient red tongue tree. He nodded and said, "This ancient red tongue tree's tree core is indeed a first-rate top-quality artifact crafting material. However, with merely this tree core, one would only be able to craft a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Little Yu, are you certain that you can win by relying on a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure?" As he said that, he looked to Qin Yu. Qin Yu lightly smiled. "Uncle Lan, leave everything to me. You do not have to worry." Qin Yu was not 100% confident. He also knew very well that with his artifact crafting ability, if he was in a very good state, then he would indeed be able to craft a peak second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure using this ancient red tongue tree's tree core. However, one state of artifact crafting was extremely hard to determine. An extremely minute error could cause an item's grade to be a bit lower. "Little Yu, do not try to deceive me." Zhang Lan lightly smiled. "I have also studied artifact crafting. Although I cannot compare to you, but after looking at the Zhang Lan's realm, you ought to know my level of artifact crafting." Qin Yu was startled. Zhang Lan continued, "I know very well that this ancient red tongue tree is an item born from the world. For a divine tree born from the world, its tree core contains Grand Mist spiritual energy. However, with the amount of Grand Mist spiritual energy contained in the ancient red tongue tree's tree core, one would only be able to craft a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. In order to craft a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, what one needs the most is Grand Mist spiritual energy. Little Yu, tell me, am I correct?" Qin Yu smiled bitterly. He could only nod honestly. Qin Yu knew that he would not be able to deceive Uncle Lan. Uncle Lan was also very proficient in this. Zhang Lan continued. When the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan was crafting first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures for the Azura God King, he melted down a total of 3 second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures and 6 third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures in order to obtain enough Grand Mist spiritual energy. By relying on the Grand Mist spiritual energy, a large amount of precious materials, and the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan's peak skill, he was able to refine a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Qin Yu listened carefully. Qin Yu knew that the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan had refined a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. However, the details of the process were unclear. Grand Mist spiritual energy is an extremely mysterious type of energy in the world. It doesn't have much offensive power. However, if it were to be fused into a weapon, it would allow the weapon to contain spirituality. Furthermore, its ability would become even more exceptional. Zhang Lan gasped in admiration. Even if your refining skills are good enough, you still need enough Grand Mist spiritual energy. I also have a lot of good refining materials, you should have some too, right? Adding on the ancient red tongue tree's tree core. It was likely that the ancient red tongue tree's tree core was not much inferior to the materials used by the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan to refine first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Right now, the only thing you lack is Grand Mist spiritual energy. The amount of Grand Mist spiritual energy contained in the ancient red tongue tree's tree core is too little. Qin Yu nodded. He also knew very well that the ancient red tongue tree's tree core was incomparable to the ancient ironwood tree's tree core. Regardless of whether it was the quality of the materials or the amount of Grand Mist spiritual energy it contained, there was a large gap between them. Little Yu, rest assured. I know that. You likely won't be able to find many Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Even if you have one, it would only be that jade spring gourd. Isn't that right? Zhang Lan said with a smile. Qin Yu smiled helplessly. Indeed. He did possess several Grand Mist spiritual treasures. For example, the Refining Flame wristband. However, the Refining Flame wristband was extremely important in the process of artifact crafting. How could Qin Yu possibly give it up? He also possessed the God Sealing Pagoda. However, the God Sealing Pagoda was also the key to binding Qiuzhong Fu, Black Dragon Tangio and them. As for the items that he did not use back then, he had already given them to Ho Fei and Kuro. The only item that he did not use was the jade spring gourd bestowed to him by the unfettered Exalted Celestial. As for the Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl and the Purple Rain Dress, they were two first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Unless there was something wrong with Qin Yu's head, he would not destroy these two first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Seeing Qin Yu's expression, Zhang Lan naturally understood what was going on. Little Yu, did you see that? The 9 spiritual pearls of that Zhou Xian's 9 phoenix crown are all third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Actually, merely the Grand Mist spiritual energy of these 9 third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures and the Grand Mist spiritual energy contained within the ancient red tongue tree's tree core are already sufficient. Zhang Lan said with a smile. Qin Yu said helplessly. Uncle Lan, why did you mention the 9 phoenix crown? Could it be that you want to melt the 9 phoenix crown? No. Zhang Lan also started to laugh. That is not what I meant. I merely wanted you to understand. Among the Grand Mist spiritual treasures, the majority of them are decorative Grand Mist spiritual treasures. There are relatively few Grand Mist spiritual treasures that are truly offensive. Thus, that Zhou Xian was able to take out 9 decorative Grand Mist spiritual pearls at once. Qin Yu nodded. Even if it were decorative Grand Mist spiritual treasures, he did not possess any. I know that you've only cultivated for a short period of time. Thus, you would naturally not be able to obtain many Grand Mist spiritual treasures. However, your Uncle Lan, a smile appeared on Zhang Lan's face. I have existed since the birth of the divine realm. I have also been a god king for an extremely long period of time. Think about it, I was even able to obtain the ancient ironwood tree. How many ordinary useless Grand Mist spiritual treasures could I possibly possess? Zhang Lan looked to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Qin Yu completely understood what Zhang Lan meant. What Uncle Lan meant was that he would take out his Grand Mist spiritual treasures and melt them down for him. Don't mind it too much. There are indeed a lot of useless Grand Mist spiritual treasures that I can only play with. How about this? I'll take out 6 third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures and a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure for you to melt down. Zhang Lan's words contained an irresistible aura. Qin Yu looked to Uncle Lan. In the end he nodded. Exactly how much do I owe Uncle Lon? Qin Yu was already unable to calculate in his heart. In the mortal realm, Uncle Lon had saved him many times. As for him, from the mortal realm to the divine realm, Qin Yu was unable to imagine how many times Uncle Lon had secretly helped him. In short, in Qin Yu's heart, Uncle Lan's status was about the same as his father's. Let's go. Follow me back to the wood mansion. Those useless grand mist spiritual treasures are all stored in the wood mansion's treasury. Zhang Lan said to Qin Yu. Qin Yu nodded. Inside the wood mansion. After the sage emperor's palace's banquet ended, Zhang Lan went to Qin Yu's place. As for Zhang Yan, she went to the wood mansion. As the main character of the groom search, other than the first time, Zhang Li did not show herself in the other 2 times. In a secluded courtyard deep within the wood mansion, under the ancient ironwood tree, Zhang Yan and Zhang Li were sitting together. Little sister, big brother Qin Yu lost. Zhang Li suddenly stood up. Zhang Yan hurriedly said, Big sister, you already know what happened earlier. This matter cannot be blamed on big brother Qin Yu. The way I see it, it's obvious that the Northwest Sage Emperor had done something in the dark. Otherwise, how could Zhou Xian win? I know. Zhang Li had a bitter smile on her face. Merely, I am worried about big brother Qin Yu's current frame of mind. I remember that back in the mortal realm, what big brother Qin Yu hated the most was being insulted by others. When others insulted him, he would immediately retaliate and even kill them. The time that Zhang Li spent with Qin Yu was too short. What she did not know was that after so many years in the mortal realm to the divine realm, Qin Yu was no longer as easily angered as he was in the mortal realm. Little sister, during the banquet, did mother really side with Zhou Xian? Zhang Li continued to ask. Between her brows, there was already a trace of worry. Zhang Yan lightly nodded her head. Chunyu Rou was extremely caring towards the 2 of them. However, regarding this matter, it caused Zhang Li's heart to ache. I know about the relationship between mother and aunt, but... Zhang Li wanted to say something, but in the end, she did not say it. Big brother Qin Yu will definitely be in a difficult situation. In order to not make things difficult for me, he fought for me time and time again. That purple mystic mansion. Zhang Li's eyes flickered with tears. Zhang Yan, who had personally gone to the purple mystic mansion, described everything that happened in the purple mystic mansion. Others might not know, but Zhang Li knew very well that many of the decorations in the purple mystic mansion contained stories of the past. From every part of the mansion, Zhang Li could feel Qin Yu's intentions. They said that big brother Qin Yu was not attentive. Zhang Li felt indignant in her heart. No. Zhang Li's gaze suddenly became firm. Little sister, follow me to the floating cloud mansion. Zhang Yan was startled. Big sister, what are you doing? Zhang Yan hurriedly stopped her. Heavens, Zhang Li was the main character of the groom search. At this juncture, if someone were to discover that Zhang Li had run to the floating cloud mansion, who knew how many people would gossip about her? Zhang Li said, Go to the floating cloud mansion. Big sister. Zhang Yan pulled Zhang Li. Zhang Li smiled faintly. I love mother, but mother still has you and also my brothers. Without me, it's nothing to them. But big brother Qin Yu, on his journey from the mortal realm, how many life and death crises has he experienced? What have I been doing all these years? I have only been hiding in the wood mansion, hiding. Zhang Li had a bitter smile on her face. Big brother Qin Yu has been the one to block all the storms. I have only been waiting. Right now, for the sake of not making things difficult for me, he is trying his best to do everything. The first gift was a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. The second gift was that purple mystic mansion. All of this I don't understand. Did those god kings not see all of this? Could it be that big brother Qin Yu's intentions are fake? I don't want to continue on like this. I only want to do something for big brother Qin Yu. Zhang Li looked to her little sister with a smile on her face. Zhang Yan was stunned. Was this still the gentle and obedient girl that listened to everything her parents said? Jiang Yan had never seen her sister so resolute before. If Big Brother Qin Yu had stopped training, he would have been able to stay in the immortal devil and demon realm with his father and brothers. However, he gave the responsibility of taking care of his father to his brothers. As for him, he endured the pain of leaving his father, brothers and relatives to come to the unfamiliar divine realm. All of his struggles were for me. Tears flickered in Zhang Li's eyes. If Big Brother Qin Yu was able to do all of this, why can't I do the same? Furthermore, father and mother, their children do not lack me. Jiang Yan slowly let go of her hand. She understood her older sister. Zhang Li smiled to Jiang Yan and then directly walked out of the courtyard. Qin Yu and Jiang Lan had already returned to the wood mansion. The two of them were currently walking toward the depths of the wood mansion through the corridor. However, in the corridor, Qin Yu was pleasantly surprised to see Zhang Li. Li Er. Qin Yu was filled with joy. All of his worries, all of his hardships, all of his worries turned into joy and happiness when he saw Li Er. Zhang Li looked to Qin Yu in amazement. Only after a long while did she rush into Qin Yu's bosom. Then she tightly hugged Qin Yu. Just like that, tears began to flow from her eyes. Li Er, what happened to you? Qin Yu was completely confused. He looked to Zhang Lan beside him. Zhang Lan was also extremely confused. Qin Yu could only comfort Zhang Li. Zhang Li, who was in Qin Yu's bosom, suddenly raised her head and looked to Qin Yu. She said something that shocked Qin Yu. Big Brother Qin Yu, let's elope, okay? Don't worry about those tedious things anymore. Li Er, don't let your imagination run wild. Qin Yu immediately understood what Zhang Li was thinking. He was moved. Worries and hardships were nothing. As long as Li Er understood all of this, Qin Yu was already blessed. You just have to stay here obediently. You just have to wait another 10 years. In 10 years I will obtain the third chosen candidate spot. At that time you can just wait to marry me. Qin Yu said with a smile. Zhang Li looked to Qin Yu in a daze. She was able to tell that in Qin Yu's eyes, there was not the slightest trace of worries and hardships. Instead, there was only happiness and love for her. Big Brother Qin Yu, That's enough. Qin Yu smiled. His gaze was fixed on Zhang Li. Do not give up halfway, okay? I hope that you will be able to happily become my bride. Zhang Li wanted to say something. However, she did not say anything. At this moment, she only felt that she was completely surrounded by happiness and emotions. After that, Qin Yu encountered Jiang Yan. They chatted for a long time. Only then did Zhang Li completely open up the knot in her heart. After that, Qin Yu, Zhang Li, Jiang Yan and Jiang Lan began to walk toward the wood mansion's storehouse. Storehouse, I have never entered it before. What sort of treasures are there? Jiang Yan's eyes were shining with excitement. Zhang Li was only following Qin Yu. In her heart, following Qin Yu was already enough for her. This storehouse is a simple use of the spatial laws. You all follow me. Jiang Lan walked to the entrance of an underground passage. The entrance to the underground passage opened by itself. Qin Yu and them followed Jiang Lan and entered the wood mansion's storehouse. Chapter 602. Wood Mansion's Storehouse. Once they stepped into it, they immediately felt a fresh and clean aura. The Wood Mansion's storehouse was actually like a paradise. The sky was azure. The clouds were gently drifting about like silk. The river was slowly flowing. Not far from the river was an exquisite pavilion building. Qin Yu and them stepped on the soft grass and walked toward the pavilion building. This is the storehouse. Many of the items have been casually placed in the grass or between the mountain rocks. However, the Grand Mist spiritual treasures are all stored in that pavilion building. Jiang Lan pointed to the pavilion building and said with a smile. Qin Yu cast his gaze toward the pavilion building. At the same time, the spatial energy that originated from the new cosmos spread out and enveloped the pavilion building. Qin Yu was able to clearly see everything in the pavilion building. Sure enough, there are a lot of Grand Mist's spiritual treasures. Qin Yu knew in his heart that in terms of those useless Grand Mist spiritual treasures, he was simply unable to compare with the God Kings that had existed since the birth of the divine realm. There were over 20 Grand Mist spiritual treasures casually placed in Jianglan's pavilion building. The majority of them were third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. There were 4 second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. However, these Grand Mist spiritual treasures were all used to play with and admire. In terms of attack power, they were likely inferior to even ordinary heavenly divine artifacts. Following the wooden stairs, they entered the pavilion building. This pavilion building was extremely elegant and simple. On one side of the wooden shelves were some peculiar items. Of the 18 items on the wooden shelves, 12 of them are Grand Mist spiritual treasures. These Grand Mist spiritual treasures do not have much use. However, they are pretty good for admiring. Zhonglan smiled. He walked to the side of the pavilion building's main hall and climbed up the stairs. Following him, everyone entered the second floor of the pavilion building. On top of a wooden cabinet in the pavilion building was a row of items. Zhonglan casually waved his hand. 7 items floated in the air. Little you of these 7 items, 6 are third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures and 1 is a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. I'll leave them to you. Wow, Uncle Lon, this is so beautiful. Zhang Yan suddenly grabbed a small cyan-colored zebra. This could also be considered to be a flight-type Grand Mist spiritual treasure. It is capable of enlarging the zebra. As long as one sits on it, one will be able to fly rapidly. Zhang Lan casually said. To a godly monarch, a flying auxiliary numinous treasure was meaningless. In Zhang Yan's mind, the scene of Jun Luoyu sitting on a horse and her hugging Jun Luoyu's waist from behind appeared. Uncle Lan, can you give this to me? Zhang Yan looked to Zhang Lan with her large eyes. Zhang Lan could only smile. How could he possibly refuse? After Qin Yu and the others left the Wood Mansion's storehouse, a group of people gathered in the main hall to have a meal together. Everyone was happy and harmonious together. When Zhang Lan saw Qin Yu, Li Er and Zhang Yan, the 3 youngsters, he was also smiling the entire time. Qin Yu, when do you plan to melt down that Grand Mist spiritual treasure? Halfway through the meal, Zhang Lan asked. Melt down. Qin Yu smiled and said, there's no need to rush. The time acceleration limit of my space can reach more than 10,000 times. No matter what, we have enough time. How about this, 3 days from now, I will enter my space and begin to melt down those Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Furthermore, I will begin to craft artifacts. Zhang Yan immediately said. Ah, I also want to see you craft artifacts. Zhang Li did not say anything. She merely looked to Qin Yu with a smile on her face. She did not wish to make things difficult for Qin Yu. Lil Sis Yen I might take a very long time to craft artifacts this time around. That is because before I begin, I must adjust my state and strive to reach my peak state before I begin. I also do not know about the exact amount of time that I will be able to craft artifacts. Qin Yu tactfully refused. Zhang Yan pouted her mouth and humphed. Zhang Lan was suddenly startled. Immediately, Qin Yu, Zhang Yan and Zhang Li all looked to Uncle Lan. The 3 of them all had questioning gazes. Uncle Lan, what happened? Qin Yu asked. Zhang Lan said with a smile. Earlier when I heard you talking about artifact crafting, I immediately thought of Zhou. Thus, I spread out my divine awareness and covered the entire divine realm. However, I discovered that the Thunder Punishment City had actually invited Duanmu Feng over. God King level experts were able to search through the entire divine realm with a single thought. Duanmu Feng, Grandmaster Artifact Craftsman Duanmu Feng? Zhang Yan muttered. Doesn't that Thunder Punishment City have a Grandmaster Artifact Craftsman Yezi? Why would they invite Duanmu Feng over? Zhang Lan lightly laughed. I reckon that even the Thunder Punishment City does not possess enough second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Thus, they wanted a Grandmaster artifact craftsman to craft them. As for the other two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen, they would generally require several thousand years to craft. Although the utmost North Sage Emperor had only given them 10 years, the God Kings of the Thunder Punishment City were also capable of creating their own space. Furthermore, the God Kings of the Thunder Punishment City also possessed partial comprehension of the temporal laws. Thus, it was not hard for them to accelerate time by 1,000 times. At this moment, Qin Yu started to frown. He began to ponder in his heart. Could it be that they want the two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen to join hands? That can't be right. Every single Grandmaster artifact craftsman possesses their own artifact crafting techniques. If the two of them were to join hands, it would instead affect both of them. As they were both Grandmaster artifact craftsmen, Qin Yu naturally knew about this very well. Could it be? Qin Yu suddenly thought of a possibility. If that's the case, then the Thunder Punishment City is truly too rich and overbearing. Zhang Lan said with a smile. The way I see it, for the sake of victory, the Thunder Punishment City would likely have the two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen craft their respective artifacts. At the same time, they would provide sufficient materials and Grand Mist's spiritual energy. I reckon that the two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen would take whichever one of them managed to craft a better Grand Mist's spiritual treasure. Little Yu, it would seem that the Thunder Punishment City is determined to obtain it. Zhang Lan looked to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Qin Yu had a light smile on his face. Crafting a Grand Mist's spiritual treasure is not something that would be useful just because there are more people. Qin Yu was extremely confident. In terms of crafting the artifact embryo, it was likely that only the craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan's tempered 1,000 refinement would be able to compare with his 9-spiral space rend. As for the tempering agent, if he were to have his clone help him, once the cold mist domain was unleashed, his control over the cold mist energy would definitely be much stronger than others. As for the spirit awakening, who would be able to compare with him? Zhou Xian, sometimes rather than relying on others, it is better to rely on oneself. Qin Yu said in his heart. Several days later, inside the wood mansion, Zhang Lan, Zhang Li and Zhang Yan were all looking at Qin Yu. Qin Yu had already decided to enter the new cosmos today to begin melting down the Grand Mist's spiritual treasures and artifact crafting. Little Yu, do not put too much pressure on yourself. Zhang Lan patted Qin Yu's shoulder. I know, Uncle Lan. Qin Yu lightly smiled. As for Zhang Li, she walked over to Qin Yu. Zhang Li knew that Qin Yu was going to work hard for the groom search again. As for her, she could only quietly wait in the wood mansion. Standing on her tiptoes, Zhang Li closed her eyes and lightly kissed Qin Yu. She then opened her eyes and looked to Qin Yu. With a soft voice she said, Big brother Qin Yu, I will wait for you here. Qin Yu lightly smiled and also looked to Zhang Li. Wow, there are even sparks between the two of them. Zhang Yan made a big fuss from the side. Qin Yu and Zhang Li immediately started laughing. They looked to Zhang Yan beside them. Inside the new cosmos purple mystic star. Qin Yu had already ordered Uncle Fu to not receive any guests in the floating cloud mansion in this period of time. Melting them down is the most time-consuming process. For the 7 Grand Mist spiritual treasures, I reckon it will take 10 days to completely melt them down. Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out a fist-sized strange stone. This was a third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Let's melt this first. With a movement of his body, Qin Yu arrived at a mountain peak of the East Hazy Mountain. He sat cross-legged on an enormous boulder on the mountain peak. Then Qin Yu waved his hand. That Grand Mist spiritual treasure floated before Qin Yu. Melting down Grand Mist spiritual treasures was relatively simple. However, there were 2 conditions. The first condition was that the Grand Mist spiritual treasure melted down must be ownerless. If it was ownerless and had been imbued with heavenly divine energy, it would not be melted down. The second condition was that the ownerless Grand Mist spiritual treasure must be burned for a long period of time. Furthermore, the flame must be the void flames. Generally, it would take an entire day of burning for a third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure to completely decompose and release Grand Mist spiritual energy. As for second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures, it would take 3 to 4 days. Now that my strength has increased greatly, on top of this refining flame wristband, using the void flames is extremely simple. Void flames flew out from Qin Yu's body. The void flames enveloped the fist-sized odd-shaped stone. Being burned by the void flames, the odd-shaped stone did not react at all at the beginning. However, as time passed, after nearly 2 hours had passed, the surface of the stone began to gradually change. As Qin Yu continued to emit void flames from his body, the odd-shaped stone began to change more and more. After half a day, the odd-shaped stone finally let out a kocha sound and split into 3 parts. However, there was still no Grand Mist spiritual energy coming out from it. This Grand Mist spiritual energy will only be released after the Grand Mist spiritual treasure has been burned to the point of decomposition. Qin Yu had a smile on his face. Qin Yu knew very well that the Grand Mist spiritual energy and the Grand Mist spiritual treasure had a very deep connection. It would take a very long time for the Grand Mist spiritual energy to be released. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. At this moment, the odd-shaped stone had turned into countless granules. The granules were trembling non-stop. Suddenly, bang! The granules turned into ashes one by one. At the same time, an extremely small stream of air was released. Grand Mist spiritual energy. Grand Mist spiritual energy. It's Grand Mist spiritual energy. Qin Yu's eyes immediately lit up. However, at this moment, Qin Yu was completely stunned. Immediately after, another stream of air was released. Qin Yu was still in a daze. Grand Mist. Grand Mist spiritual energy. Grand Mist spiritual energy is like this. Qin Yu felt a rumbling sound in his head. Immediately after, he grabbed with one hand and locked down a portion of the space, grabbing that bit of Grand Mist spiritual energy, completely. Qin Yu instantly disappeared from the East Hazy Mountain. At this moment, the new cosmos had already expanded to an extremely large extent, contained an extremely large amount of cosmic space. Qin Yu instantly appeared at the edge of the new cosmos. Standing at the edge, the space there was trembling. It was the most chaotic region. Freeze! Qin Yu let out a low shout. His surroundings completely calmed down. Qin Yu looked through the membrane and saw the boundless flower paste space outside the membrane. His gaze was incomparably strange. At every moment, a large amount of flower paste air would pass through the membrane and merge with the new cosmos. This caused the new cosmos to expand continuously. Could be said that every single breath of time, the flower paste air, absorbed by the new cosmos, was enough to fill a vast ocean. In the past, in Qin Yu's heart, the flower paste air was a type of energy. It was a relatively ordinary energy that formed the universe. However, at this moment, Qin Yu could no longer think of it that way. Grand Mist spiritual energy, flower paste air? Qin Yu looked to the Grand Mist spiritual energy that was floating unceasingly in his hand. He then looked to the omnipresent, boundless flower paste energy that was being frantically absorbed by the new cosmos. It was exactly the same. Qin Yu was the master of the new cosmos. When the flower paste air entered the new cosmos, Qin Yu was naturally able to clearly analyze the essence of the flower paste air. He could also clearly feel the Grand Mist spiritual energy in his hand. It was exactly the same. Qin Yu was stunned for a long time. This is the Grand Mist spiritual energy that so many god kings of the divine realm value. In order to refine Grand Mist spiritual treasures, they had to melt down a bunch of useless Grand Mist spiritual treasures. How many Grand Mist spiritual treasures are there in the entire divine realm? How many are there to melt down? At this moment, Qin Yu was truly excited. With a thought, he grabbed with one hand. A space with a circumference of 100 miles was locked down by Qin Yu. The The flower paste air within the space was also locked down by Qin Yu. A circumference of 100 miles. Haha, even if all the Grand Mist spiritual treasures in the entire divine realm were melted down, the amount of Grand Mist spiritual energy would not even be 1% of the total amount. Qin Yu's entire body was trembling. Originally, I had thought that the Grand Mist spiritual energy was a special type of energy that was born in the universe. However, from the looks of it now, it is merely the most original type of energy that formed the universe. The most original type of energy. No wonder it has such a miraculous effect. Qin Yu understood everything. Why was it that when he refined Grand Mist spiritual treasures in the past, the refining speed would increase after absorbing some Grand Mist spiritual energy? It turned out that the Grand Mist spiritual energy was the most important thing for Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Calm down, calm down. Qin Yu forced himself to calm down. After all, he still needed to go and refine artifacts. With such an excited state of mind, it would be strange if he didn't make any mistakes when refining artifacts. However, the boundless flower paste air before his eyes passed through the membrane and crazily rushed into the new universe. Then he looked at the boundless flower paste space, on the other side of the membrane. All of this was Grand Mist spiritual energy. Seeing all of this, how could he calm down? Qin Yu took a deep breath. Then, he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to adjust his state of mind. Uncle Lan's painstaking efforts and Li Er's kind intentions were clearly remembered by Qin Yu. Touching his lips, Qin Yu still remembered the feeling of Li Er kissing him. With so much Grand Mist spiritual energy, what do I have to fear when refining artifacts? Qin Yu had a tranquil smile on his face. His state of mind was slowly transforming. The moment when his state of mind reached its peak was the moment when Qin Yu began to refine artifacts. Chapter 603. Northwest Sage Emperor Zhou Hua had personally set up a space in the Northwest region's Thunder Punishment City. Furthermore, he had accelerated the time within the space by 5,000 times. Maintaining a space where time was accelerated by 5,000 times was already a challenge for Zhou Hua. He was not the Azura God King, who could easily maintain a space where time was accelerated by 10,000 times. Imperial Father, although the two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen are very powerful, it is still very hard to say whether or not they will be able to refine powerful second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. If they fail, Zhou Xian looked to his father. Zhou Hua shook his head and smiled bitterly. For the sake of his son, he had indeed put in a lot of effort. Don't worry, we have enough materials and Grand Mist spiritual energy. Logically, they should be capable of refining second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. But if... Don't worry. Zhou Hua interrupted his son's words. Even if the Grand Mist spiritual treasures refined by these two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen are not powerful enough to meet our requirements, they are still very powerful. How about I give you my Deafening Thunder Roar? The Deafening Thunder Roar was one of the more famous second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. It was a powerful spiritual treasure that Zhou Hua frequently used. It could be considered Zhou Hua's signature spiritual treasure. Thank you, Imperial Father. Zhou Xian was instantly overjoyed. With his father's words, he was relieved. Zhou Xian also knew that his imperial father, Zhou Hua, as the clan chief of one of the 8 great divine clans, possessed the Zhou clan's clan protection spiritual treasure. It was a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure that had appeared since the birth of the divine realm. Because that spiritual treasure was too powerful, Zhou Hua rarely used it. Normally, he would only use the Deafening Thunder Roar. Only at the most critical moment would he use that clan-guarding spiritual treasure. With the Deafening Thunder Roar, as long as Qin Yu's gift is not a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, I will definitely win, Zhou Xian thought in his heart. The Deafening Thunder Roar could be considered to be one of the more outstanding second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Even Qin Yu had taken out a peak second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. In the end, it was still up to the 13 God Kings to judge. As long as the disparity was not too great, he, Zhou Xian, would definitely win. At the moment when Duanmu Feng and Oyezi, the two Grandmaster artifact craftsmen, were painstakingly crafting artifacts, the current Qin Yu was quietly sitting cross-legged at the edge of the new cosmos. Qin Yu's state of mind became more and more ethereal, and his state of mind became more and more perfect. Quietly, Qin Yu sat cross-legged, feeling the ethereal state of mind. At a certain moment, Qin Yu felt that his entire body had reached a kind of peak state. He didn't know why, but Qin Yu had a feeling at this moment. He knew that, at this moment, he would definitely succeed in refining. It was a very mysterious feeling. Qin Yu opened his eyes. At this moment, Qin Yu had been sitting cross-legged for more than 10,000 years. Within 100 meters of Qin Yu, there was complete silence. 100 meters away, the space was in chaos and trembling incessantly. This was because this was the edge of the new cosmos. The new cosmos created by Qin Yu was constantly expanding. Qin Yu stood up, and the robe on his upper body suddenly dissipated, leaving his upper body bare. Qin Yu stretched out his hand, and the whirlwind-breaking hammer appeared in his hand out of thin air. With a wave of his hand, a black table appeared before him. "Clone," Qin Yu muttered in a low voice. Then a cyan-gowned Qin Yu appeared beside him. The cyan-gowned Qin Yu slightly bowed to Qin Yu. "True body." Qin Yu lightly smiled. Soon after, a section of the ancient red-tongue tree's tree trunk floated to Qin Yu's side. Qin Yu pointed with one hand, and the tree trunk that was so thick that 3 or 4 people could wrap their arms around it immediately split into 4. In the center of the tree trunk was a nearly 2-meter-tall section of scarlet red wood that was as thick as an arm. Qin Yu knew that this was the most important part of the ancient red-tongue tree. Its tree core. Other than its tree core, the best material for the ancient red-tongue tree would be the divine wood that formed its trunk. As long as one was diligent in refining those divine woods, one would be able to refine them into high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. At the moment of artifact refinement, Qin Yu had an intense urge to only use the tree core and a portion of the trunk to refine a grand mist spiritual treasure. Hoo! Frightening flames suddenly erupted from Qin Yu's left hand. The flames were mainly separated into white pure flames and void flames. For a top-quality material like this, the black divine flames were useless. That section of tree core landed on the black table before Qin Yu. Flames were revolving around the tree core. As if it was floating on water, the 2-meter-long section of tree core continued to float above the void flames and white pure flames. Holding the whirlwind space-shattering hammer in his hand, Qin Yu smashed down with the hammer. A whistling sound was heard. As the whirlwind space-shattering hammer passed through, ripples appeared in the surrounding space. 9 spatial vortexes immediately surrounded the tree core. As for Qin Yu's hammer, it smashed into the center of the tree core. Bang! Cracks appeared on the extremely tough and durable tree core after being smashed by Qin Yu's hammer that contained spatial energy. Generally, expert artifact refiners would not destroy such a perfect tree core. However, Qin Yu was not that sort of mediocre person. The way Qin Yu saw it, the correct path was to destroy and then rebuild. The frequency of Qin Yu's hammering was constantly changing. Sometimes the hammering sound was as gentle as a spring breeze, but sometimes it was as intense as thunder. The scarlet red tree core had already turned into a scarlet red liquid that was constantly flowing. This was the tree core, the essence nurtured by the ancient red bronze tree's energy. Whoosh! The whirlwind space-shattering hammer emitted 8 spatial vortexes that completely swept up the scarlet red liquid and enveloped it with flames. One could even see with the naked eye that there was a light flowing within the scarlet red liquid. Beads of sweat seeped out of Qin Yu's forehead. However, the beads of sweat instantly disappeared. During the artifact refinement process, Qin Yu did not allow anything to affect the artifact refinement process. It's about time. This time, Qin Yu used very few materials for the artifact refinement. He only used the tree core and 2 portions of the main divine wood. The main divine wood that required 3 to 4 people to encircle was split into 4 portions. Qin Yu took 2 portions, but even so, the 2 portions were extremely large. Combined, 2 people might not be able to encircle them. However, when they were combined, their volume was. The artifact embryo is formed. Qin Yu extended his hand, and a scarlet-red scepter appeared in his hand. This scepter was only 2 meters long. Even the handle of the scepter was only 2 inches thick. Even the tip of the scepter was only the size of a fist. Clone, prepare to quench the flames. Qin Yu waved his hand, and the scarlet-red scepter immediately flew into the air. As for the azure-robed Qin Yu, his body naturally emitted an azure-colored aura. The cold mist domain. Within the cold mist domain, the metal elemental heavy water swam like a dragon. The azure-robed Qin Yu very easily controlled the cold mist aura and the metal elemental heavy water to encircle the scarlet-red scepter. The flexibility and toughness of the scepter were constantly increasing. It's done. Qin Yu's face had a hint of joy. At this moment, the azure-robed Qin Yu also withdrew his cold mist domain. The quenching this time was nearly perfect. The scarlet-red scepter flew back to Qin Yu. Primordial spiritual energy. Qin Yu stared at the distant, seemingly endless streams of flower paste. He couldn't help but make a grabbing motion with his hand, causing a large amount of primordial spiritual energy to fly towards him. The primordial spiritual energy completely enveloped the scarlet-red scepter. Qin Yu closed his eyes. Streaks of light flew out from his hands and landed on the scarlet-red scepter. Instantly, the scarlet-red scepter began to shine with a dazzling light. There was even a jade-green light that swirled around the surface of the scepter. Formation Universe, Spirit Awaken. On the scarlet-red scepter, the dazzling light began to conceal itself. The jade-green light also quietly concealed itself, condensing at the tip of the scarlet-red scepter. A hint of a smile appeared on Qin Yu's face. He extended his hand, causing the scarlet-red scepter to float in front of Qin Yu. Qin Yu felt extremely good. Congratulations, true body. The cyan-gowned Qin Yu bowed and said. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. His clone immediately disappeared. Qin Yu's gaze turned to the scarlet-red scepter. He began to carefully inspect it. The scepter's entire body was like a scarlet-red crystal jade. The tip of the scepter was completely jade-green in color. I wonder what grade this scepter is. Although Qin Yu was an artifact refiner, he was unable to use his eyes to observe primordial spiritual treasures. Only by dripping blood on it would one be able to clearly determine the grade of the primordial spiritual treasure. I hope it's a first-rate primordial spiritual treasure. Qin Yu began to look forward to it. He immediately dripped a drop of blood onto the tip of the scepter. Like water falling onto the surface of the sea, the blood was directly absorbed by the scepter. Qin Yu immediately realized the function of the scepter. Its attack power is this strong. Qin Yu was overjoyed. First-rate primordial spiritual treasure. It is indeed a first-rate primordial spiritual treasure. The might of the scepter caused even Qin Yu's heart to be moved. Once the scepter appeared, it would be able to lock down space. At the same time, the tip of the scepter would be able to produce tens of thousands of branches that would completely trap one's opponent. Once one was trapped, even if one possessed teleportation techniques, one would not be able to escape. Furthermore, this scepter itself was incomparably tough. It was completely capable of being used as a spiked club to attack one's opponent. First-rate primordial spiritual treasures are truly powerful. However, I reckon that in terms of binding power, it is still inferior to that dark and yellow energy of mine. Qin Yu thought in his heart. When he was thinking about this, Qin Yu still had an unconcealable smile on his face. I'll show it to Uncle Lon, Li Er and them. At this moment, Qin Yu only wanted to tell this happy matter to Li Er, Uncle Lon and them. Qin Yu directly disappeared from the new cosmos. Inside the wood mansion. Right after he returned to the wood mansion, Qin Yu immediately spread out his spatial energy. He immediately found Jiang Lan and Jiang Li. "Uncle Lan Li I've succeeded." Qin Yu's excited voice was directly transmitted into Jiang Lan and Jiang Li's minds. At this moment, a boom suddenly sounded from the sky. The sky that was originally clear and bright was suddenly covered by red clouds. "Succeeded?" Jiang Lan was slightly startled. Could it be that little Yu He? Jiang Lan swept out with his divine awareness and discovered Qin Yu. At the same time, he also noticed the scarlet scepter in Qin Yu's hand. With his experience, he was naturally able to sense that this scepter was extraordinary. With a movement of his body, Jiang Lan arrived beside Qin Yu. As for Jiang Li, she also quickly ran over. Her face was filled with excitement. What's going on?" At this moment, Qin Yu noticed the abnormal phenomenon in the sky. The entire sky had turned scarlet red. Even the earth of the divine realm had been dyed red. At this moment, practically everyone in the divine realm noticed this scene. Jiang Lan raised his head to take a glance. After that, his eyes shined. He directly asked Qin Yu, "Little Yu, you've managed to craft a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. Uncle Lan, how did you know?" Qin Yu asked with a smile on his face. Jiang Lan laughed heartily. "Haha, in the divine realm, only the birth of a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure would cause the heaven and earth to turn scarlet red and cause spiritual treasure lightning to descend." Spiritual treasure lightning? Qin Yu was confused. Back then, the craftsman god Cheho Yuan had crafted a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure for the Azura god king. In the divine realm, it was something that was passed down from generation to generation. However, Cheho Yuan himself did not describe it in detail. It was as if he did not care much about it. Only after knowing more about Cheho Yuan would one know that Cheho Yuan's goal was the exalted celestial spiritual treasure. Likely, only the creation of an exalted celestial spiritual treasure would cause him to be truly happy. It's a kind of tribulation lightning. It has only appeared once in the history of the divine realm. Its power is not very strong. As long as you let that scepter block it, it could be considered a success. Although it is said to be tribulation lightning, the way I see it, it could only be considered as the sign of the birth of a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. Jiang Lan did not care about that tribulation lightning in the slightest. Red clouds covered the entire sky and covered the boundless sky. In the boundless sky, streaks of all kinds of lightning shot down from all directions. Like fireworks, the countless streaks of lightning illuminated the entire divine realm. In the end, the countless streaks of lightning gathered together and formed a 7-colored lightning bolt. It directly smashed down toward the floating snow city's wood mansion. This lightning doesn't seem to be very powerful. Right after the lightning entered Qin Yu's spatial region, Qin Yu immediately sensed it. Casually, he had his scepter soar into the sky. Bang! The 7-colored lightning struck the scepter. Lightning radiated in all directions. It merely caused the scepter to become even more dazzling. However, the scepter was not damaged in the slightest. Sure enough, it cannot be considered to be tribulation lightning. Qin Yu nodded in his heart. Qin Yu suddenly thought of something. According to what Uncle Lan said earlier, the red clouds covering the sky and the descent of the spiritual treasure lightning was the omen of the birth of a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. Wouldn't this allow the entire divine realm to know that I have refined a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure in the wood mansion? Haha, the attraction of a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure is truly enormous. Qin Yu, that big brother of mine has come. Jiang Lan suddenly said to Qin Yu with a smile. Qin Yu was slightly startled. Even that Jiang Xing has come. Jiang Lan shook his head and lightly laughed. At this moment, the 3 great god kings of the floating snow city were about to gather in the wood mansion. Chapter 604. Red clouds covered the sky as the spiritual treasure thunder descended. There was simply no need to spread the news of the birth of a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. Anyone who knew about the matter of the craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan refining a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure would know about it. Another first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure was born in the divine realm. First-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. It's in Snowfall City. Within the Thunder Punishment City, Zhou Xian looked in the direction of the floating snow city. His gaze was extremely complicated. Could it be that Qin Yu? The matter was very simple. Other than the missing craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan, there were only 3 Grandmaster Artificers in the divine realm. Among them, Duan Mufeng and Oyezi were in the Thunder Punishment City. This new first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure could only have been refined by Qin Yu or Che-Ho Yuan, who had reappeared. Regardless of whether it was Che-Ho Yuan or Qin Yu who refined it, it didn't mean much. Because Qin Yu was the new master of the Bewitching God Temple and could be considered Che-Ho Yuan's successor. Even if Che-Ho Yuan was refining it, he was probably refining it for Qin Yu. Imperial Father. Zhou Xian looked at Zhou Hua beside him. Zhou Hua's expression was complicated as he said in a low voice, "Stay here. I'll make a trip to Floating Snow City to check on the situation." Yes, Imperial Father. Zhou Xian could only persist in his heart. Until the end, he would not give up no matter what. At this moment, the 2 master craftsmen who were still in the space maintained by Zhou Hua had no idea what was happening outside. Inside Zhou Hua's space, they couldn't see what was happening in the divine world. It wasn't just the Northwest Sage Emperor Zhou Hua, the utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fuyu, the Azura God King, the utmost South Sage Emperor. All the experts had rushed to the floating snow city. A single first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure was sufficient to move the hearts of practically all the God Kings in the divine realm. At this moment, the floating snow city had become the place with the most God Kings. More than half of the God Kings in the entire divine realm had gathered here. Inside the Mu Mansion. What about the scepter? Once Zhang Fan walked over. His gaze was fixed on the scepter that was floating in the air. However, Qin Yu extended his hand and retrieved the scepter. Zhang Fan looked to Qin Yu. He displayed a smile on his face. "Qin Yu, is that scepter the new first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure?" "Exactly." Qin Yu nodded slightly. Qin Yu had a pretty good impression of Zhang Fan. After all, in the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace, Zhang Fan had supported him. Especially last time, Zhang Fan had clearly stood on his side. "May I know who refined this first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure?" Zhang Fan asked. Zhang Fan naturally knew about the relationship between Qin Yu and Che-Ho Yuan. He was even guessing in his heart whether or not it might be Che-Ho Yuan who had come to help Qin Yu. Zhang Lan stood to the side and said with a smile, "This scepter was personally crafted by little Yu." The gaze that Zhang Fan looked to Qin Yu with immediately shined. The new craftsman god. In Zhang Fan's heart, Qin Yu's status immediately increased by a large amount. Zhang Fan then glanced at the somewhat restless Zhang Li who was standing beside Qin Yu. "Oh Lier, you're also here. Seems like you're already familiar with Qin Yu, right?" Zhang Fan said with a smile. At this moment, Zhang Fan wished even more for Qin Yu to become his son-in-law. To have a new craftsman god become his son-in-law. How wonderful of a thing would that be? What did a new craftsman god signify? It signified that his utmost north floating snow city might obtain a new first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Although it required sufficient materials, sufficient Grand Mist spiritual energy and Qin Yu to be in a very good state when crafting the artifact. Although it was very difficult to satisfy all 3 requirements, there was still hope, no? Eldest uncle, second uncle. A young man wearing a purple gown walked in. It was the floating snow city's 3rd god king Jiang Xing. As a second-generation descendant of the Jiang clan, Jiang Xing was able to reach the god king level. His willpower and talent were both extremely astonishing. Earlier, when I saw the red clouds covering the sky and the spiritual treasure lightning descending upon our floating snow city, I had been thinking the entire time. In the entire floating snow city, other than Brother Qin Yu, there is likely no one else capable of crafting a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. This Jiang Xing was extremely enthusiastic. He, a grand god king, actually addressed Qin Yu as Brother Qin Yu. In the divine realm, practically all of the god kings would treat a craftsman god as an equal and treat him with great respect. That was because all of the god kings wanted a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. If they had one, they would want a second. If they didn't have one, they would naturally want one even more. From this, it was not hard to imagine the status of a craftsman god. Ever since the disappearance of the craftsman god Cheho Yuan, many god kings had been disappointed. The birth of a new craftsman god had brought hope to even more god kings. To possess a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure, one would be a peak existence among the numerous god kings. After all, the majority of the god kings were only at the first level of the temporal laws, time acceleration. A small portion of the god kings did not possess the slightest comprehension of the temporal laws. Only a single person, the Azura god king of the divine realm. He had comprehended the second level of the temporal laws, time stop. It was precisely because of this that the Azura god king became the publicly accepted #1 god king. Back then, when he did not possess a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure, he had relied on the remarkable ability time stop to not fear the 8 great sage emperors. After he obtained a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure, even the 8 great sage emperors were no match for him. Haha, today is truly lively. Zhang Lan suddenly started laughing. Zhang Fan and Zhang Xing also started laughing. Zhang Fan looked to Zhang Lan. Second brother, those god kings are all outside. Should we allow them to come in? Everyone, it's better for you all to come in. Zhang Lan said with a clear voice. Those god kings were still rather concerned about Zhang Lan's strength. It was rumored that he was a bit stronger than Zhang Fan. Most importantly, Zhang Lan had already given the first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure gauze featherblade that he had just obtained to Zhang Lan. After all, a single first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure was already sufficient. Zhang Fan had given the gauze feather blade to Zhang Lan. Firstly, he hoped that the relationship between him and Zhang Lan would ease up. Secondly, he wanted to increase the strength of the utmost northern region's floating snow city. Haha, I am truly envious of brother Zhang Fan. Following the loud laughter, a middle-aged man with long scarlet hair walked in. It was the utmost West Sage Emperor of the Mount Blazing Flame. Behind the utmost West Sage Emperor was another man with long scarlet hair. Evidently, this man was another god king of the utmost western region's Mount Blazing Flame. O Qin Yu, in our utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, you did not manage to obtain a single first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure. After you arrived at the floating snow city, you only managed to gift brother Zhang Fan a single gauze feather blade. And now, you've even managed to craft a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure yourself. Sai, you truly make me jealous. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu walked over in the air while smiling. Behind Huangfu Yu were 2 other people. The 100 Flowers God King Huangfu Liuxiang and the Gold Sword God King Huangfu Lei. These 2 god kings both smiled to the crowd. Then they turned their gazes to Qin Yu. Qin Yu, you've truly become more and more amazing. I knew that my eyesight was pretty good. Following that gentle voice, that bewitching blood demon queen also walked over. Qin Yu could only squeeze out a smile. Heavens, aren't there too many god kings? Qin Yu felt a burst of fear in his heart. Of the 8 great sacred lands of the divine realm, the Mount Dazzling Gold that possessed a relationship with Qin Yu, the 3 god kings had all arrived. As for the other places, they would generally have 2 god kings. Only the Thunder Punishment City had only sent a single god king, Zhou Hua. Perhaps the Thunder Punishment City also knew that after fighting with Qin Yu for so long, Qin Yu did not have a good impression of them. Other than the 8 great sacred lands, several god kings from the 3 great Ascender powers had also arrived. The gazes with which these god-kings looked to Qin Yu were filled with incomparable passion. "Qin Yu, do you still recognize me?" a gray-clothed man said to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Qin Yu naturally knew this man. This gray-clothed man was the same gray-clothed man who had taken away Ho Fei. At this moment, this gray-clothed man had also arrived with the Azura God King. "I am the Azura Sea's God King Pingtian. When I first met you, I never would have imagined that you were Che Ho Yuan's successor. In the blink of an eye, you've become this powerful," the gray-clothed man said with a smile. The entire wood mansion was incomparably noisy. There were over 20 god kings present. Back when they were in the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace, the god kings were seated high above the Sage Emperor's palace. Thus, very rarely did they pay attention to the people below them. However now, one by one, the god kings were all smiling at Qin Yu. All of their attitudes were extremely good. Although there is only a single step between a Grandmaster artifact craftsman and a craftsman god, their statuses are extremely different. Seeing this scene, Qin Yu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It was very normal. Grandmaster artifact craftsmen were only capable of crafting high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. At the very most, they would spend a large amount of materials and Grand Mist spiritual energy to craft second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. To God King level experts, second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures were not very attractive. However, it was different for craftsman gods. Only those who were capable of crafting first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures were qualified to be called craftsman gods. Who among this group of people did not wish to obtain a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure? A large number of god kings were gathered. In the end, a grand banquet was held in a large guest hall of the Wood Mansion. As for the people that were participating in this banquet, other than Qin Yu, the others were all god kings. Even Zhang Li was not present. There were a total of 24 seats in the main hall. Among them, 17 belonged to the 8 great families. 6 more belonged to the 3 great Ascenda powers. As for the final seat, it was Qin Yu's seat. In the banquet, Qin Yu became the most dazzling person present. "Qin Yu." The Azura God King smiled as he raised his cup to Qin Yu. Qin Yu also raised his cup. The Azura God King continued. "The scene of Brother Che Ho crafting a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure for me is still vivid in my mind. Never would I have expected that Brother Che Ho's successor, Qin Yu, your artifact crafting attainments have already caught up to Brother Che Ho's and become the new craftsman god. I believe Brother Che Ho would definitely be incomparably happy if he were to know of this news." "Oh, that's right, Qin Yu, may I know where Brother Che Ho is right now?" Once those words were said, the entire guest hall grew completely silent. Che Ho Yuan's whereabouts were a secret of the divine realm. After all, Che Ho Yuan's whereabouts were something that even god kings were unable to determine. Even if they did not know, how could Qin Yu possibly know? Senior Che Ho wholeheartedly pursued the pinnacle of artifact crafting. For the sake of reaching the pinnacle of artifact crafting and crafting an exalted celestial spiritual treasure, Senior Che Ho left the bewitching god temple long ago. "As for his whereabouts, even I do not know," Qin Yu said honestly. Crafting an exalted celestial spiritual treasure. The god kings present looked at each other in dismay. They were all endlessly astonished. If Che Ho Yuan was truly able to craft an exalted celestial spiritual treasure, then it would be a frightening matter. Brother Che Ho's pursuit of the pinnacle of artifact crafting is truly admirable and worthy of respect. For this we should drink a cup of wine. The Azura God King smiled and drank his cup of wine. The atmosphere of the banquet was very harmonious. No one mentioned that they wanted Qin Yu to help them. However, without batting an eyelid, all of the god kings had pulled their relationship closer to Qin Yu. All of the god kings had an extremely good attitude toward Qin Yu. On the surface, Qin Yu was also responding to them. However, Qin Yu knew very well in his heart. In the past, these god kings were high and above. Yet now they were all so courteous toward him. Wasn't it all because he had crafted a first-rate grand mist spiritual treasure? Only with strength will one be able to obtain respect, Qin Yu thought in his heart. After the banquet ended, all of the god kings roughly knew what had happened. Thus, they all enthusiastically bid their farewells to Qin Yu and then left one by one. When the utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu bid his farewells to Qin Yu, he said to Qin Yu with a smile, "Qin Yu, to be honest, I hope from the bottom of my heart that you will fail to participate in the groom search." Qin Yu could only smile bitterly. He had already guessed what the utmost East Sage Emperor was going to say next. "If you were to fail, then it would be very possible for you to become my son-in-law. However, it would appear now that the possibility of you failing is too low. I am truly jealous of that Jiang Fan. Look, he's smiling so happily." Huangfu Yu pointed to Jiang Fan, who stood not far away. Qin Yu could only smile. "Your Majesty, Sage Emperor, even if I were to become the son-in-law of the utmost northern region's floating snow city, it would still be difficult for me to become the Misty Mystic Palace's palace master of Mount Dazzling Gold. If in the future your Majesty were to have Qin Yu help with anything, then Qin Yu would definitely not decline." Qin Yu immediately said. The utmost East Sage Emperor slightly nodded. "With those words of yours, I am relieved. Well then, I shall return now. Let us meet again at the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace." Utmost North Sage Emperor's palace. Qin Yu understood in his heart that the next time they meet would be when the third chosen candidate spot was determined. "I have already firmly obtained this third chosen candidate spot," Qin Yu thought in his heart. It would be strange if he didn't win with a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Furthermore, those god kings, which one of them didn't want to establish a good relationship with Qin Yu? It was likely that the several sage emperors that had sided with Zhou Xian last time were all regretting their actions. After all, how could the benefits that the Thunder Punishment City had given them be comparable to the assistance of a craftsman god? As for offending a craftsman god, how much effort would they have to spend to eliminate the estrangement between them? To become enemies with a craftsman god. Only those with mental problems would become enemies with a craftsman god. There's still a long period of time before the third chosen candidate spot is determined. In this period of time, I'll gather some more precious materials and then use them with the endless Grand Mist spiritual energy to craft some more Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Qin Yu immediately made his decision. Chapter 605. In the Thunder Punishment City, Yezi and Duanmu Feng, the two Grandmaster artifact refiners, had painstakingly refined Grand Mist spiritual treasures for so many years. The results of the two of them were finally out. Yezi's condition was extremely good. He actually managed to refine a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. As for Duanmu Feng, he only managed to refine a third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. He had wasted so many materials and Grand Mist spiritual energy for nothing. Yezi, Duanmu, let's end the refinement here," Zhou Hua said to the two master refiners with a smile. Yezi and Duanmu Feng exchanged glances, their eyes filled with doubt. According to the original plan, Zhou Hua had prepared enough materials to refine 4 Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Every Grandmaster artifact refiner would have to refine the Grand Mist spiritual treasures twice. Right now, they had only refined the Grand Mist spiritual treasures once. Yezi couldn't help but ask in confusion, "Your Majesty, you? Haha, it's better that I tell you all this. During the period when you all were crafting artifacts, a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure had already appeared in the divine realm." Although Zhou Hua was smiling, his expression was not very good. First-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Come into being. Was it nurtured by heaven and earth, or was it refined by humans? Yezi asked in shock. "While you were crafting artifacts, I did not see the red clouds covering the sky when the first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure appeared." Zhou Hua shook his head and said with a smile, "Crimson clouds covering the sky. Such a scene would only appear when a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure was artificially refined. Who made it? Could it be that Cheho Yuan has returned? Duan Mu Feng questioned. Oh, Yezi said softly. Could it be that Qin Yu? Zhou Hua nodded and said, Yeah, it's Qin Yu. He managed to refine a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. My son, Zhou Xian, no longer has any hope of obtaining the third chosen spot. When Zhou Hua saw Qin Yu take out a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, he had already decided to have his son give up on the third spot. There were a lot of people that came to visit Qin Yu. However, not a single person was able to find Qin Yu. This included Uncle Lon, Lear and them. That was because Qin Yu had been crafting artifacts in the new cosmos the entire time. Without his consent, who would be able to enter the new cosmos? Time passed by. 1 year, 2 years. The day of the third selection was approaching. Zhang Li's mood was clearly much better than before. Qin Yu had managed to refine a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. The final victor of this groom search was practically decided. Uncle Lon, has big brother Qin Yu not come out for the past few years? Zhang Li was a little anxious. Zhang Lon smiled and said, Don't worry. Last year, Qin Yu had come out for a short period of time. However, he soon returned. That's why you didn't see it. Last year. Zhang Li was puzzled. When he came out last year, he came to borrow some artifact crafting materials from me. After all, my artifact crafting ability is not that great and I have no use for those materials. Thus I gave them all to little Yu, said Zhang Lon with a light smile. In terms of artifact crafting, Zhang Lon was only proficient in spatial divine artifacts. As for the other weapons, his ability to craft them was insufficient. Borrow refining materials. Zhang Li frowned. Is big brother Qin Yu still refining? So what if he has managed to craft a high-quality heavenly divine artifact? Why must he work so hard? Zhang Li was unable to understand. At this moment, neither Zhang Li nor Zhang Lon knew that Qin Yu possessed a boundless amount of Grand Mist spiritual energy. Qin Yu also did not have the time to inform Li Er and them about this. Beads of sweat rolled down from Qin Yu's temples. Qin Yu carefully inspected the long whip in his hand. He displayed a satisfied expression. It's finally over. Qin Yu gasped in admiration. Even though I possess a boundless amount of Grand Mist spiritual energy, I still need a sufficient amount of good artifact crafting materials. A total of 80,000 years. In these 80,000 years, Qin Yu would always spend a relatively long time adjusting his state before crafting artifacts. He would strive to reach his best state. In these 80,000 years, Qin Yu had crafted a total of 73 Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Among the 73 Grand Mist spiritual treasures, there were 2 third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures, 70 second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures, and a single first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Unfortunately, a large amount of precious materials were all spent on the Purple Mystic Mansion. Qin Yu sighed helplessly. Back then, in order to craft the Purple Mystic Mansion, he had indeed paid an enormous price. All those precious materials, yet in the end, he only managed to craft a decorative high-quality heavenly divine artifact. As for materials capable of crafting a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, when supplemented with Grand Mist spiritual energy, one would be able to craft a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Not many of the precious materials left behind by Cheho Yuan remained. Later on, Qin Yu went to borrow some materials from Uncle Lon. Unexpectedly, Uncle Lon actually gave him that many precious materials. Only then did Qin Yu manage to craft a total of 73 Grand Mist spiritual treasures. In order to craft a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, materials, Grand Mist spiritual energy, ability to craft artifacts in one state are all indispensable. Qin Yu gasped in admiration. He had crafted a total of 73 Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Only a single one of them was a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. The materials used to craft this first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure were extremely precious. Furthermore, Qin Yu's state was extremely good at that time. His state was even better than when he crafted the scepter. Qin Yu flipped his hand and a dark green sword appeared in his hand. Light was circulating through the surface of the sword. At the same time, the sharp aura emitted by the sword caused even the surrounding space to tremble. I'll leave this water-splitter sword in the new cosmos for the time being. With an intention from Qin Yu, this first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure was sent into the bewitching god temple. Qin Yu did not dare to bring this weapon to the divine realm. He feared that if he were to bring it out, it would once again cause a commotion. At that time, Qin Yu was unable to imagine what sort of reaction those god kings would have. It was best that he did not stir up too much trouble. Furthermore, Qin Yu did not plan to publicize the remaining 72 Grand Mist spiritual treasures. He planned to store them for the time being. It would not be too late to take them out at a suitable time. It should not be long until the day of the third chosen candidate spot's evaluation. Let's go out first. Qin Yu disappeared from the new cosmos. Zhongli was extremely happy when Qin Yu returned to the divine realm. Thus, she spent the entire day with Qin Yu. Qin Yu also stayed in the wood mansion the entire time. Ho Fei and Kuro also frequently came to the wood mansion to stroll around. Little Yu, tomorrow is the day of the third chosen candidate spot's evaluation. Have you prepared your gift? Zhonglan looked to Qin Yu. Zhonglan knew that Qin Yu had crafted a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. However, it was still hard to say whether or not Qin Yu would give that first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure as a gift. After all, it was a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. When they competed for the first chosen candidate spot, Qin Yu had already handed over one. How could he possibly hand over another one? This third chosen candidate spot, I am determined to obtain it. Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out that scepter. With this first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure scepter, 10,000 willows, how could Zhou Xian possibly make a comeback? In Qin Yu's heart, Grand Mist spiritual treasures were merely worldly possessions. For the sake of Li Er, why would he be unwilling to part with them? Zhonglan nodded in satisfaction. The next day, the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace was bustling with noise and excitement as usual. The 13 god kings of the divine realm were seated high up in the palace. The various heavenly deities below were also chatting with one another. Frequently, there would even be people who would go over to Qin Yu to chat with him. Qin Yu had completely become the focus of the Sage Emperor's palace. Brother Qin Yu, I've heard that you've crafted a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. I truly admire you, truly admire you. Zhou Xian, who sat beside Qin Yu, said to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. However, within the depths of his gaze was a trace of resentment. Qin Yu was naturally able to guess what Zhou Xian was feeling right now. Haha, it's merely luck. Brother Zhou Xian, last time, Brother Zhou Xian was extremely confident in obtaining the third chosen candidate spot. What sort of gift have you prepared this time around? Qin Yu asked with a light smile on his face. Zhou Xian's expression turned sluggish. Ha ha, Zhou Xian laughed hollowly. Regardless of how good the gift might be, it would still not be able to match up to Brother Qin Yu's gift. Zhou Xian knew very well in his heart that the reason why he had won last time around was due to his help. It was all because his imperial father had secretly helped him and made those saint emperors support him. However, as a judge, although they could be biased, they could not be too obvious. For example, if Qin Yu were to take out a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure and Zhou Xian's second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, how could they not be biased? No matter how biased they might be, they could not insist that a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure was better than a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Thus, if the disparity was too great, they would not be able to help even if they wanted to. Furthermore, Qin Yu's status had changed enormously. He was now the new craftsman god. Those sage emperors were all regretting that they had helped Zhou Xian and offended Qin Yu. Today, how could they not help Qin Yu? How could they possibly be biased toward Zhou Xian? Even if Qin Yu and Zhou Xian both possessed second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures, and even if Qin Yu's was slightly inferior, it was likely that the sage emperors would still support Qin Yu. Everyone! The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhang Fan stood up. His face was brimming with smiles. With a clear voice he said, "Today is the day when the third chosen candidate spot will be judged. According to the rules that were set up back then, today's gift will be judged based on whose gift is more precious. Haha, the judging this time around is much easier than last time." Zhang Fan's gaze swept through the crowd. When he saw Qin Yu, he slightly paused. He even slightly smiled to Qin Yu. "Now, the 17 candidates, please display your gifts. Let's begin with the final candidate," Zhang Fan directly announced. Immediately, the final candidate, the prince of the subterranean city, stood up. He walked to the center of the palace hall, slightly bowed and said, "God Kings, I forfeit this competition." Forfeit. The heavenly deities present all grew silent. They looked at each other in dismay. Merely, the various god kings above were still lightly smiling. Zhang Fan even slightly nodded and said, "Worthy nephew, you can withdraw first. Next. God Kings, I forfeit this match as well." 13 candidates forfeited in succession. Some heavenly deities did not understand. However, those candidates all knew the truth very well. More precious than a gift. If they were unable to even take out a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, then it would be better for them to directly forfeit. Everyone knew that Qin Yu had already crafted a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. As for that Zhou Xian, he even had 2 Grandmaster Artifact Craftsman craft artifacts. From this, it could be seen how determined Qin Yu and Zhou Xian were to obtain the treasures. Next, Zhang Fan said indifferently, "It was one thing for a single candidate to forfeit. However, for 13 candidates to forfeit in succession, this caused Zhang Fan to feel a bit displeased." At this moment, Zhou Xian stood up and walked to the center of the palace hall. "God Kings." Zhou Xian bowed respectfully. He then said with a clear voice, "Brother Qin Yu has already crafted a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Thus, I naturally do not have the face to take out a gift. I also forfeit." The entire palace hall suddenly grew quiet. Soon after, it became noisy. The 2 great competitors for the groom search were Qin Yu and Zhou Xian. This was something that many people had determined in their hearts. Unexpectedly, Zhou Xian actually directly forfeited. Qin Yu looked to Zhou Xian, who stood in the center of the palace hall. A smile appeared on his face. "Forfeit. Oh, you forfeited. In that case Qin Yu had already made his decision. Zhou Xian returned to his seat. He then slightly smiled to Qin Yu beside him. "Brother Qin Yu, it's up to you." Next, Zhang Fan's gaze turned to Qin Yu. Everyone present, including the various god kings above, were all looking at Qin Yu. All of the god kings had smiles on their faces. Their courteous treatment toward Qin Yu was something that all of the heavenly deities below were able to sense. Qin Yu stood up and then walked to the center of the palace hall. Zhang Fan looked to Qin Yu with a burning gaze. What he looked forward to the most was that Qin Yu would be able to take out that first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. "God Kings, my gift is..." Qin Yu extended his right hand. A long whip suddenly appeared in his hand. This long whip is the highest-level weapon among second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Zhang Fan's smile grew slightly sluggish. The god kings above were also stunned. Zhou Xian, who sat on the side, was also stunned. It was not a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. It was merely a top-level weapon among second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Zhang Fan was stunned for a long time before he managed to react. He immediately displayed a smile on his face. This long whip is a top-level weapon among second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Zhang Fan had a satisfied expression. Qin Yu lightly smiled. After that he withdrew. At the moment when Zhou Xian forfeited, Qin Yu had already made his decision. There was no need for him to take out a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. This peak weapon among second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures was sufficient for him to obtain the third chosen candidate spot. After all, the others had all forfeited. As for the remaining Queen Ho and Shen Tufan, how could they possibly be able to take out a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure? They might not even be able to take out a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Even if they were able to take out a second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, it was likely that the majority of the God Kings would support Qin Yu, this new craftsman god. Chapter 606. Next person. Zhang Fan's clear voice resounded through the palace hall. Shen Tufan immediately stood up and walked to the center of the palace hall. God Kings, I forfeit this competition. Shen Tufan also forfeited. When Shen Tufan returned to his seat, he even winked and smiled at Qin Yu. Qin Yu was also able to sense that Shen Tufan was instead very happy. After all, it was actually Shen Tufan himself who was unwilling to participate in this groom search. It was his imperial father who had forced him to do so. After a short moment, Queen Ho arrived. God Kings, Brother Qin Yu has already taken out his gift. I know that I am inferior and thus decided not to take out my gift to embarrass myself. I also forfeit. Queen Ho said. Queen Ho was merely a palace master of the floating snow city. He actually only possessed a single second-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. It was bestowed to him by Zhang Fan. How could he, Queen Ho, possibly take out such a precious gift? You can withdraw, Zhang Fan said with a smile. Zhang Fan naturally knew of his old subordinate's wealth. All 17 candidates had arrived. The display of their gifts had surprised many people. Of the 17 candidates, 16 had forfeited. Only Qin Yu had displayed his gift. The result was extremely clear. Brother Qin Yu, congratulations. When Queen Ho walked down from the palace hall and passed by Qin Yu, he said to Qin Yu with a smile. Qin Yu lightly smiled. Zhang Fan stood up. He looked to the crowd and said, Everyone, from the looks of it now, there seems to be no need for us to judge. Of the 17 candidates, 16 have forfeited. Even if we wanted to judge, we would not be able to do so. Haha. The utmost West Sage Emperor from the Mount Blazing Flame also laughed. Zhang Fan nodded and said, Everyone, in that case, I shall announce the result. The various God Kings all nodded. Only then did Zhang Fan look to the crowd below. With a clear voice he announced, The third chosen candidate spot for this groom search shall be obtained by Qin Yu. Thank you, Your Majesty Sage Emperor. Qin Yu stood up. Furthermore, the whip in her hand also flew toward Zhang Fan. Since he had obtained this chosen candidate spot, this gift naturally belonged to Zhang Fan. Zhang Fan held the long whip with one hand and continued. The 3 chosen spots for the groom search have been determined. 2 of them were obtained by Qin Yu and 1 was obtained by Zhou Xian. So, one of them will become my son-in-law. Tomorrow, please submit the list of betrothal gifts to the Sage Emperor Palace. I will decide who will win based on the list of betrothal gifts and the performance of the 2 candidates in the process. In the end, the winner will be determined. The winner will send the betrothal gifts according to the list. The person who loses is not allowed to take it. Zhang Fan said with a light smile. Zhang Fan was not too greedy. He merely looked at the list and did not directly ask for their betrothal gifts. Send me the list tomorrow. After 10 days, I will officially announce who will become my son-in-law, Li Er's husband, in this Sage Emperor's palace. Zhang Fan's face was filled with smiles. Qin Yu and Zhou Xian below glanced at each other. 10 days, there's only 10 days left. Qin Yu muttered in his heart. After 10 days, he would have to openly marry Zhang Li. After that, everyone began to drink and chat enthusiastically. Only after the banquet ended did Qin Yu break away from the crowd and walk out of the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace. Outside of the imperial city's gate, Qin Yu. This time around, Zhou Xian had left the Sage Emperor's palace even earlier than Qin Yu. He had been quietly waiting for Qin Yu outside of the city gate. What was this Zhou Xian planning to do? Qin Yu looked to Zhou Xian with a smile on his face. Brother Zhou Xian, I saw that you had left the Sage Emperor's palace early, so you were actually waiting for me here. May I know what important matter you have? It's nothing, I'm merely congratulating you, Zhou Xian said with a smile. He then asked, May I know what Brother Qin Yu's betrothal gift is? Only by knowing yourself and knowing your enemy would one be able to win 100 battles. This Zhou Xian actually came to ask him this question. Qin Yu lightly smiled and said, As for what the betrothal gift is, I have yet to completely determine it. May I know what your betrothal gift is, Zhou Xian? Regarding that, I still need to return and discuss it with my imperial father. Zhou Xian did not answer. Qin Yu sneered in his heart. This betrothal gift was most definitely decided long ago. After all, he was going to send the list of betrothal gifts tomorrow. However, Zhou Xian actually replied that he still needed to return and discuss it. It was clearly an excuse. In that case, Brother Zhou Xian, you can return and properly discuss it. I will not be accompanying you. Qin Yu immediately turned around and left. Seeing Qin Yu being so rude, Zhou Xian's facial muscles involuntarily twitched. He then sneered and led his subordinates away from the city gate. After returning to the floating cloud mansion, Qin Yu, Kuro and Hou Fei gathered together. Big brother, is your betrothal gift really that 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts? Isn't that a bit too frightening? I reckon that even if it's a bit too much for you, that utmost North Sage Emperor still wouldn't believe it. Hou Fei muttered. Kuro also nodded and said, What the monkey said is correct. That utmost North Sage Emperor might not necessarily believe that you have 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Qin Yu smiled. 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts. If this was truly written on the list of betrothal gifts, then the utmost North Sage Emperor would definitely be very anxious. The utmost North Sage Emperor must be feeling anxious and unable to believe it completely. After all, even if all of the precious materials in the divine realm were added together, it would still not be enough to craft 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts. However, what the utmost North Sage Emperor and them did not know was that the low-quality heavenly divine artifacts that Qin Yu had crafted were merely some ordinary materials. 1 million low-quality heavenly divine artifacts as the betrothal gift. That was a decision made in the past. Now I have changed my decision. Qin Yu pretended to be mysterious and said. Hou Fei and Kuro both looked to Qin Yu. This third chosen candidate spot was relatively easy to obtain. As for the first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure that I prepared beforehand, that scepter, 10,000 willows, I did not take it out. Thus, I have decided that the betrothal gift will be this scepter, 10,000 willows. Qin Yu said with a smile. Qin Yu had always pursued perfection in everything he did. A first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure as the betrothal gift. Even in the groom search, if his performance was the same as Zhou Xian's, he would likely still be able to obtain victory. Furthermore, in the groom search, he had obtained 2 candidate spots whereas Zhou Xian had only obtained 1. And now, his betrothal gift was a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Was there any reason for him not to win? The next day, Qin Yu arrived at the Sage Emperor's palace by himself. However, right after he arrived at the entrance of the Sage Emperor's palace, he was stopped by the Sage Emperor's palace's guards. The heavenly deity bodyguard also recognized Qin Yu. He immediately said respectfully, Lord Qin Yu, His Majesty the Sage Emperor has ordered that you and Lord Zhou Xian's list of betrothal gifts are to be handed over to me. I will pass it on to His Majesty the Sage Emperor. His Majesty the Sage Emperor has said that he will not meet with either you or Zhou Xianzhong for the next 10 days. This is to show fairness. Qin Yu came to a sudden realization. However, Qin Yu felt it to be ridiculous. Not seeing him and Zhou Xian. How could this be considered fair? Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out a golden scroll. He handed it to the heavenly deity bodyguard. The heavenly deity bodyguard bowed to Qin Yu again. Lord Qin Yu, I will go and present this to His Majesty the Sage Emperor right away. Qin Yu nodded slightly. Then, he continued to stand before the Sage Emperor's palace's entrance. His spatial energy completely spread out and enveloped the entire Sage Emperor's palace as he carefully monitored the heavenly deity bodyguard. Qin Yu knew that this was the Sage Emperor's palace, and that the heavenly deity bodyguard would definitely not deliberately hide the betrothal gift list. However, in order to guarantee the victory of this groom search, Qin Yu would not allow any accidents to occur. He must personally see that the betrothal gift list was in the hands of the utmost North Sage Emperor. Under the coverage of his spatial energy, Qin Yu also saw that the utmost North Sage Emperor had received the betrothal gift list. Qin Yu was able to clearly see the excited expression on the utmost North Sage Emperor's face. Qin Yu's betrothal gift list contained the first-rate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure Scepter, 10,000 willows. Oh, brother Qin Yu is also here. Zhou Xian's voice sounded beside Qin Yu's ear. Qin Yu turned around and saw Zhou Xian walking over with a smile on his face. At this moment, that heavenly deity bodyguard had already returned to the Sage Emperor's palace's entrance. When he saw Zhou Xian, he immediately said, Lord Zhou Xian, His Majesty the Sage Emperor has ordered. The heavenly deity bodyguard repeated what he had told Qin Yu to Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. He took a glance at the heavenly deity bodyguard. At the same time, Zhou Xian looked to Qin Yu. Qin Yu lightly laughed. Zhou Xian, this is the Sage Emperor's palace. Are you afraid that this heavenly deity bodyguard would dare to deceive you? Zhou Xian looked to the heavenly deity bodyguard and snorted coldly. Then, he handed the golden scroll to the heavenly deity bodyguard. Brother Zhou Xian seems to care a lot about that betrothal gift list. Could it be that you think that you still have hope of winning? Qin Yu sneered and said with disdain. Zhou Xian was naturally able to sense that disdainful tone. As for Qin Yu, he was surprised. If Zhou Xian did not have any hope at all, he shouldn't care about the betrothal gift list. However, from the looks of it, the betrothal gift seemed to be very extraordinary. Could it be that there was something more precious than a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure? Even if Zhou Xian's betrothal gift was also a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, Qin Yu, who had obtained 2 of the selections, should still be able to win. Thus, Qin Yu could only use such a disdainful tone to provoke Zhou Xian. He wanted to see what sort of confidence Zhou Xian had. I have no hope of winning. Zhou Xian took a glance at Qin Yu. He did not care about Qin Yu's mockery in the slightest. Brother Qin Yu, we will know the result in 10 days. After he finished saying those words, Zhou Xian directly left the Sage Emperor's palace. Qin Yu looked to Zhou Xian's back and frowned. Exactly what sort of confidence does this Zhou Xian have? Could it be that he is putting on an act? Qin Yu stopped thinking about it. Qin Yu did not believe that Zhou Xian would still be able to win at this stage. Qin Yu and Zhou Xian both handed over their betrothal gift lists. In the remaining few days, everyone waited quietly. The utmost North Sage Emperor even announced that the Sage Emperor's palace would not accept outsiders during this period of time. Inside the Thunder Punishment City. Imperial Father, would that utmost North Sage Emperor choose me to be his son-in-law because of that list? Zhou Xian was not confident in himself. That Qin Yu's betrothal gift list might be that first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Zhou Hua muttered to himself. Xian don't be anxious. If Qin Yu's betrothal gift list is truly that first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure, I only have a 30% chance of success regarding the betrothal gift list that we handed over. Zhou Hua frowned. However, this is already our last resort. After all, You will only be able to obtain 1 out of the 3 spots. We can only take a gamble. Zhou Xian nodded slightly. Several days later, the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace announced the result. As for who the final victor would be, no one had 100% certainty. Days felt like years. This was the feeling that Qin Yu was currently experiencing. With every passing minute and second, Qin Yu's heart was filled with anxiety. This was especially true when Zhou Xian handed over the betrothal gift list. His expression and words caused Qin Yu's thoughts to run wild. Could it be that this Zhou Xian truly possesses some sort of powerful ability? Qin Yu guessed in his heart. No, this won't do. No matter what, I must win this time around. Qin Yu immediately stood up. At the same time, he spread out his spatial power. Qin Yu's spatial power was capable of covering a circumference of several hundred miles. Although the floating cloud mansion and the wood mansion were relatively far from each other, they were still within this range. There are no god kings monitoring. Qin Yu's spatial power covered an area. All the movements of the god kings were being monitored. Qin Yu directly teleported over and arrived in the wood mansion. Little Yu. Zhang Lan, who was sitting beside the pond, turned around to look. At this moment, Qin Yu had just walked in from the courtyard entrance. Uncle Lan. Qin Yu's face was slightly red. It was red from anxiousness. What's wrong? Zhang Lan was relatively calm. He immediately smiled and said, Oh, that's right, I don't recall seeing you enter the wood mansion's entrance. How did you suddenly arrive here? At this moment, how could Qin Yu possibly have the interest to talk about these things? Uncle Lan, let's not talk about this anymore. In these past 2 or 3 days, I have been feeling somewhat uneasy. Recalling Zhou Xian's expression when he handed over the betrothal gift list, I think that Zhou Xian ought to have some trump cards. I wish to request Uncle Lan's help in going to the utmost North Sage Emperor to investigate. If the utmost North Sage Emperor is truly biased toward Zhou Xian, then please help me speak to him and have him state his conditions. I will try my best to satisfy him. At this moment, Qin Yu was in a bit of a mess. Calm down, Zhang Lan said to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Your current advantage is extremely clear. You do not have to worry too much. Qin Yu could only smile bitterly. How many years had it been? All for the sake of being together with Li Er. Furthermore, in the process of the groom's search, he had also strived his hardest to obtain her. If he were to lose in the end, then what would that mean? Would he be forced onto the path of no return? Seeing Qin Yu's expression, Zhang Lan repeatedly said, Okay, I'll personally go to the Sage Emperor's palace and have a proper chat with that big brother of mine. Is that enough? Only then did Qin Yu's heart calm down a bit. Thank you, Uncle Lan. I'll have to trouble Uncle Lan again. Qin Yu also felt a bit embarrassed in his heart. Merely, this matter was something that Qin Yu's heart would continue to be in suspense the entire time. Zhang Lan smiled. I'll go right away. Uncle Lan disappeared from the wood mansion. I hope that everything goes smoothly. Qin Yu was looking forward to it in his heart. You're tuning in to the Whispers of Romance YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.